My beloved child, you didn't realize it in the moment, but the heavens were holding their breath for this breakthrough. My child, you stood at a wall built by fear, pain, and delay, and instead of walking away like before, you pressed forward. This wasn't just about reaching a goal. This was about becoming the version of you that hell couldn't stop and heaven couldn't wait for. The threshold you crossed was not made of stone or steel. It was made of every lie that said, "You're not enough." And yet, you walked through it not with the strength of the world, but with the quiet, powerful courage of someone who finally believed they are loved. I saw you wrestle with your past, question your worth, and wonder if you'd ever make it. I saw every silent prayer, every tear no one else caught, and every time you chose to rise anyway. You see, what you overcame was not just a circumstance, it was a mindset, a history, a fear, a generational echo telling you to quit. But you didn't. You finally broke through the version of you that was only surviving and stepped into the identity I always knew was yours, victor, not victim. You didn't just cross a line, you shattered chains. And the realm of darkness recognized that shift before even you did. There's a reason your soul feels lighter, your nights seem calmer, and your steps more certain. It's because something eternal happened when you pushed past that invisible boundary. You left behind who the world said you were and stepped into who I declared you to be. You finally did it, and now, nothing will ever be the same again. Even before you opened your eyes to greet the morning, I was already watching over you with compassion deeper than the oceans and love more vast than the galaxies. You dragged yourself out of bed with a soul weary from invisible wounds, yet no one saw the battle raging inside you. They saw your smile, but I saw your struggle. I watched the silent cries that echoed in the dark when everyone else had turned away. You didn't sob for attention, you wept for relief, for clarity, for a strength that seemed unreachable. And though your pillow caught those tears, I gathered each one as evidence that you were still choosing to stand in the storm. There is something sacred about your persistence, something heaven applauds, because even when it would have been easier to stay down, you stood again and again and again. My child, that quiet bravery is more powerful than any loud declaration. You didn't wait to feel strong before moving. You moved despite weakness. You carried burdens that should have crushed you, but instead, they carved out space for divine strength to dwell. I saw the tremble in your hands when you reached for hope, unsure if it would catch you. I saw the weight in your chest when you smiled for others while your own heart felt like it was breaking. You endured days when peace felt like a myth, and yet you still whispered, "God, I trust you," even if you barely believed it in that moment. That whisper meant more to me than 1,000 perfect prayers. It meant you were still connected to me, still reaching, still hoping against hope. You didn't know it then, but every step you took forward sent shockwaves through the spiritual realm. Demons that once mocked you began to fear you, not because you were loud, but because you were unshakable. I didn't ignore your pain. I collected it, turned it into purpose, and began sowing it into the soil of your future. Those mornings when you didn't feel like rising, that was when I was closest. That's when angels surrounded your space, holding your soul together when it felt like everything else was falling apart. You may not have seen me, but you walked with me. And now, as light breaks through those clouds, as you take another breath not just to survive, but to live, know this: I'm proud of you. I celebrate every morning you got up when the enemy hoped you'd stay down. You could have disappeared into the background, given into numbness, but you didn't. You showed up broken but breathing, weary but worshiping, unsure but unwavering. That, my child, is courage. That is the kind of faith that moves mountains, even if it doesn't shout from the rooftops. You finally did it not because you fell fearless, but because you chose to keep going. And that decision has activated blessings you're only beginning to see. Keep walking with me. This is only the beginning of the beauty that will rise from everything you cried through. There were moments when the pressure around you grew deafening, when voices of fear, disappointment, and exhaustion tried to drown out every ounce of hope you had left. The atmosphere was heavy with despair, and every circumstance seemed to join in one loud chorus declaring, "It's over." But deep within your spirit, buried beneath the weight of anxiety and the clutter of confusion, there was still a faint whisper, gentle, yet persistent. It didn't force itself upon you, and didn't demand attention, but it remained. That whisper was me, speaking in the quiet corners of your heart, reminding you that surrender was not your only option. I saw you clinging to that barely audible word when you had every excuse to walk away. I watched as you stood in the center of the storm, surrounded by crashing waves of doubt, and yet you chose to believe that there might still be more, that maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't finished yet. You didn't realize it, but that decision, that internal yes to keep holding on, shook the very foundations of what was working against you. While others looked for signs in the sky, you trusted the whisper in your soul. That's where the turning point happened, not in a grand event, but in the quiet moment of spiritual resistance where you decided to hold my hand even though you couldn't see the road ahead. That act of trust moved the unseen. You turned your back on fear's loud demands and leaned into faith's gentle tug. You resisted the noise that told you to stop praying, to stop believing, to stop caring. And the choice, made over and over again in secret, released a wave of grace that's now preparing a new chapter for you. I need you to know, beloved, that whispers are often where I do my greatest work. Not in the shouting winds or roaring thunder, but in the stillness where your heart leans close enough to hear me. That whisper you followed was my voice guiding you through the shadows. Every time you tuned out the discouragement around you and chose to believe what you couldn't yet see, you grew. Your spiritual ears sharpened. Your discernment deepened. And you began to walk not just by faith but by alignment with me. That's how chains break without noise. That's how hearts heal without explanation. You've been led by a sound so quiet, the world thought you were lost. But you weren't lost, you were led. You were being trained to listen differently, to trust differently, to rise differently. I never shouted because I wanted you to lean in. I wanted you to recognize that I'm not only the God of power but the God of presence. And you did it, you leaned in. You heard me. You stayed when others scattered. You kept building when nothing around you made sense. You chose conviction over comfort, and because of that, you've opened yourself to revelations that can't be earned, only received by those who listen. I'm proud of you for not chasing noise. I'm proud that you didn't let the chaos outside dictate the calm inside. And I want you to know something powerful, because you responded to the whisper. I'm about to speak louder through your life. The quiet places you protect and will soon be filled with testimonies. The same people who told you to stop will witness what happens when a child of God refuses to let go. So rest now, knowing this: when you chose to listen, you were actually beginning to lead. You finally did it. You learned to follow the whisper. And now, I will raise your voice to echo what faith can do. You thought you were barely making it, just surviving one hardship after another, but something extraordinary was happening deep inside you. With each decision to trust me, even when fear tried to seize control, a quiet transformation took place within your soul. You didn't feel stronger in those moments. In fact, most of the time, you felt fragile, uncertain, and overwhelmed. But what you couldn't see was that every time you resisted the urge to panic, every time you whispered, "I still believe," through trembling lips, your spiritual foundation was being fortified. What looked like hesitation to others was actually inner growth happening at a divine pace. The muscles of your faith were developing in silence. You were thinking, you were stretching. I watched you confront things that once terrified you, and although fear still knocked on your door, you didn't let it move in anymore. That was power. Not the kind the world celebrates, but the kind heaven honors. You didn't need applause to keep going. You needed peace. And every time you chose to walk in my promises instead of your worries, you stepped further into that peace even when everything around you begged for a reaction. Each battle you faced was not just a test, it was a training. It was forging you into someone whose courage doesn't rely on circumstance, whose peace doesn't depend on understanding, whose joy cannot be stolen by external chaos. Do you know how rare that is? My child, that's spiritual maturity. That's the kind of endurance that makes hell nervous and draws heaven's favor. You no longer needed to see immediate change to believe something was shifting. That is where real faith lives, not in comfort, but in the conviction that I am who I say I am, even when the world tells you otherwise. You began to recognize that fear has a voice, but it doesn't hold the final word. You became skilled in silencing it, not by shouting back, but by standing firm. And standing, even in silence, became your strength. While others looked for escape, you looked for encounter. You found me in the places fear tried to dominate. You discovered that bravery isn't the absence of doubt, it's the decision to move forward anyway, knowing you're not alone. You never needed to feel ready to become steady. You just needed to stay connected to me. And you did. Even on the days when your faith was no more than a flicker, you protected it like fire in the wilderness. You shielded it from the wind of discouragement and guarded it against the storm of negativity. And though that flame seemed small, it never went out. I was breathing on it the entire time. Every step you took, every fear you faced, every lie you replaced with my truth, all of it added up to something you now carry: resilience. Not the brittle kind that cracks under pressure, but the sacred kind that bends and bounces back with grace. That's why you're still standing. That's why what was meant to finish you couldn't find its mark. Because you learned to fight without fists and rise without recognition. You became strong in the way only my presence can make someone strong. And that strength is not temporary. It's not for just one season. It's part of your identity now. You didn't ask for a platform, but now your life itself is becoming a message. A message that says, I chose faith when fear was easier. And that message will unlock hope in places where darkness thought it had won. You finally did it, not by force, not by shouting, but by choosing me again and again when fear tried to win your heart. And now, because of that, I am unlocking levels of peace and purpose you never imagined you were capable of walking in. Say close to me. We are just getting started. You may not have seen it clearly then, but the very seasons that felt like punishment were actually preparation. I didn't allow the storms to destroy you, I allowed them to shape you. There were battles that shook your faith, circumstances that drained your strength, and nights when you questioned if you could survive one more blow. But through every moment that felt like a breakdown, something far deeper was happening. Your spiritual armor was being forged in the fire of affliction. The tears you wept in hidden places became the waters that softened your heart to receive deeper wisdom. You thought you were losing time, losing relationships, losing yourself. But in reality, what was falling apart was everything that could no longer go with you into this new chapter. I was stripping away the excess, removing the unnecessary, pruning what wasn't fruitful. And yes, you hurt. It confused you. It made you wonder why I stayed silent when you cried out. But my silence wasn't absence, it was the stillness of a master craftsman, working carefully on a masterpiece. Every disappointment was a tool in my hand. Every rejection was redirection. Every time you felt like the ground gave way beneath you, I was laying a new foundation beneath your feet, one that couldn't be shaken. Your spirit was stretched beyond what you thought it could bear, and yet, here you were, not only intact, but wiser, deeper, stronger, and more anchored than ever before. The fire didn't burn you, it refined you. The crushing didn't destroy you, it pressed out everything counterfeit. The wounds didn't disqualify you, they became entry points for my healing power. You see, the enemy thought those battles would wear you down, that they'd turn your heart cold or drive you away from me. But instead, they pushed you closer to my presence. The more you were pressed, the more you leaned on me. And the more you leaned on me, the more you discovered strength you didn't even know you had. Not strength that comes from self-confidence, but strength that is born from total dependence. The kind of strength that understands surrender is not weakness, it's wisdom. You began to fight differently. You stopped trying to control everything and started inviting me into everything. That's when the shift happened. Not outwardly at first, but deep inside, where real change takes root. And now, As you stand at this threshold, you realize that none of it was wasted. The chaos that tried to crush you actually became the classroom where you learned to walk by truth and not by trends. The valley that drained you also taught you how to find rivers of living water that don't run dry. You've emerged with scars. Yes, but those scars are no longer signs of defeat. They are evidence of survival, proof that you stood in the midst of what should have ended you and you chose to keep breathing, keep believing, keep walking. And that decision repeated over and over is what brought you here. This moment you're entering, this season of rising, is not random. It's the result of everything that tried to break you but failed. You are being built, not broken. Crafted, not crushed. Designed, not discarded. Every hit you endured has now become part of the authority you carry. Every hard lesson has become a sword of discernment you now wield. You finally see that what was meant to harm you actually trained you. And now, you are equipped to walk in purpose, to lead with compassion, and to love from a place of real understanding. My child, you finally did it not just by surviving the war, but by letting it transform you. And now, it's time to step into the promise that waited on the other side of the pain. I've been saving it just for you. You didn't have to speak for me to understand. The ache in your chest, the tightness in your breath, the moments you stared blankly at the ceiling while your heart screamed louder than any voice ever could. I heard it all. You were surrounded by quiet, but I was present in every heartbeat, attentive to every sigh. When your voice trembled too much to pray, I interpreted your silence as a cry for help. You looked around and saw no rescue, but that was because I was already sitting beside you, not with noise, but with presence. While others walked by, unaware of the weight you carried, I knelt beside you, holding it with you, making sure it didn't crush your spirit completely. You may have thought you were forgotten in those moments, but I was closer than your skin, nearer than your next thought. I wasn't watching from a distance. I was inhabiting your silence. I was resting in the stillness where you thought nothing existed. You see, silence isn't empty when I'm in it. It's full of unseen movement, quiet protection, and invisible strength being restored little by little. When the world was too loud and your soul withdrew into itself, I didn't leave, I leaned in closer. There's a sacred space in the unspoken, a holy chamber where words fail but hearts connect. That's where I met you. Not in grand speeches or eloquent declarations, but in the moments when your spirit could do nothing else but be still. It wasn't weakness, it was sacred surrender. The kind that draws my hand faster than any performance. I want you to understand something important. I never needed your strength to rescue you, I needed your permission to be near you. And you gave me that, even unknowingly, when you sat in your stillness and whispered, even with your breath, I can't do this alone. That whisper was loud in heaven. I watched you try to hold it together for everyone else while your own heart was fraying at the seams. You smiled so they wouldn't worry. You served so they wouldn't ask. You laughed so they wouldn't see, but I saw. I saw behind the mask. I saw what you wouldn't dare admit out loud. You weren't just tired, you were breaking. And yet, you still welcomed me in. Not with polished prayers, but with your quiet endurance. And in return, I covered you. I wrapped you in grace. I assigned angels to stand at your side while your soul found its breath again. You didn't need to hear me to be held by me. My arms were around you even when your eyes were too clouded to perceive it. The pain you felt was real, but so was my nearness. You thought healing only came through action, through motion, through declarations. But what you're learning now is that sometimes healing comes in hush. Sometimes restoration is born in the silence where nothing seems to happen. Because that's where I do my most intricate work, mending what was broken without rushing, reviving what was weary without pressure. You didn't need to say a word. You just needed to remain. And that, my child, you did. You remained. When the temptation was to run, to isolate, to numb yourself, you stayed in the silence and waited. That waiting became a sanctuary. That stillness became an altar. And now, from that sacred quiet, I am bringing forth beauty that will speak louder than anything noise could ever say. So don't underestimate those moments when you felt unseen and unheard. They were not wasted. They were watch. They were filled with my whispers, my comfort, my promise. You made it through not because you shouted your pain, but because you trusted me enough to sit with it. And I was faithful to meet you there. You finally did it. You survived the silence. And now, I will cause your voice to rise, not in striving but in testimony. Your quiet victory is about to become someone else's breakthrough. Let me continue walking with you into what comes next. You whispered into the darkness, not knowing if anything heard you. You knelt with trembling knees, poured your heart out in desperation, and waited, but all you heard in return was stillness. You assumed that silence meant rejection. You feared that my lack of immediate reply was proof I had turned away. But beloved, nothing you said to me was ever ignored. Not a single word was dismissed. I caught each plea, each groan, each tear-soaked whisper, and placed it into the tapestry of your destiny. While you were weeping, I was working. While you were wondering why I hadn't moved yet, I was carefully threading your requests into something far more profound than a temporary fix. I was preparing a permanent shift. You only saw delay, but I saw design. You see, there are moments when I answer by acting immediately. But then there are times when I answer by shaping the situation, the people, even your own heart, before I release what you asked for. Not because you didn't deserve an answer, but because I was building one that would not collapse under pressure. You were asking for solutions. I was preparing transformation. The prayers you assumed had vanished into thin air were actually seeds planted deep in fertile soil, silent, yes, but growing with power. You didn't see the roots because they formed beneath the surface. I had to keep them hidden so that when the fruit came, it would last. The foundation had to be solid. Your faith had to be matured. The environment had to be aligned. That's not abandonment, that's craftsmanship. I wasn't being cruel. I was being strategic. I never forgot your prayers. On the contrary, I treated them like treasure. I stored them. I reviewed them. I aligned them with heaven's timing. You prayed for peace, and I let storms refine you so peace wouldn't just visit, it would abide. You asked for purpose, and I closed doors that would have distracted you from it. You asked me to protect you, and sometimes that meant I had to withhold what you thought would bless you. Not because you were wrong to desire it, but because I love you enough to wait until it won't harm your calling. You didn't see the threads, but I was weaving answers behind the veil. And now, slowly, those threads are becoming visible. Breakthroughs are forming not because they just appeared, but because they've been in motion all along. The prayer you thought I forgot is about to unfold before your eyes in a way so precise, you'll realize why I had to wait. What seemed like unanswered prayers were actually being recalibrated to exceed your expectations. What felt like silence was me giving space for you to grow into the person who could carry the answer well. I wasn't denying you. I was deepening you. The delay you resented was actually an act of mercy, because if I had given you what you asked for at the time, it wouldn't have lasted. But now you're ready. Now your heart is anchored. Now your hands are steady. Now your spirit can handle what your lips once pleaded for. And I want you to see this clearly, my child. Nothing was wasted. Even the words you whispered in frustration, those "why haven't you answered me yet?" cries, I received those too, with tenderness. I didn't hold them against you. I held them with you. I understood your pain. I carried your questions. And now, I will answer not just with provision, but with revelation. You'll see how every moment of waiting was filled with purpose. You'll begin to understand that my delays were never denials, they were divine detours meant to lead you straight into destiny. You finally did it. You kept praying when nothing made sense. And because of that, what's coming now will not just meet your needs, it will reflect your endurance, your trust, your quiet faith that refused to give up. I was listening the whole time. Now watch what happens when I speak. There were seasons that burned through everything you thought you needed. You felt the heat of trials, the flames of confusion, the pressure that threatened to consume your spirit entirely. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't easy. You asked me if you were being punished. You looked around and saw ashes and assumed that what once was beautiful had now ended in ruin. But what you didn't know then, and what you're only now beginning to understand, is that you were being purified, not punished. The fire wasn't sent to destroy you. It was sent to reveal what was eternal in you. I allowed the temporary things to fall away so that only what is unshakable could remain. I watched as false hopes melted, as shallow support crumbled, as surface-level identity burned away, and underneath it all, your true self began to emerge. You didn't see it while you were inside it. All you saw was the pain. You questioned everything: your worth, your calling, even my love. But I was there. Not outside the fire, watching from a safe distance. I was inside it with you. Every step you took through the furnace, I was beside you, ensuring the flames could not consume what mattered. You survived what should have scarred you beyond recognition, but look again. You are still here, and not only are you intact, but you are shining brighter than you ever have. The impurities that held you back, fear, comparison, guilt, resentment, they've been burned off. What remains is pure. What remains is strong. What remains is the version of you that carries heaven's authority without needing the world's approval. The enemy wanted the fire to define you, but I used it to refine you. While others fled from the heat, you walked through it with trembling steps, not realizing every moment inside was preparing you for the weight of glory that now rests on you. You didn't just endure, you were transformed. And because you didn't run from the process, because you chose to stay when it would have been easier to escape, you now carry something that cannot be taken. You carry depth. You carry discernment. You carry anointing that wasn't taught, it was birthed. Label will wonder where your wisdom came from. They'll ask how your peace is so unshakable. They won't know the fire you passed through to get here, but heaven knows. I know. And now, the gold within you is beginning to shine. Not because you forced it to appear, but because the flames removed what hid it. You've been through heat that would have crushed weaker vessels, but you let me shape you in it. You let me mold your soul when your flesh begged to escape. You didn't understand it then, but your willingness to stay with me in the uncomfortable spaces is what created this new strength in you. You came out of that fire with a new voice, a new authority, a new softness that doesn't make you weak but real. You are no longer dependent on approval to feel secure. You are no longer easily shaken by delays or setbacks. The fire removed those fragile places. Now, when you speak, there's power. Not loudness, but depth. When you love, there's sincerity. When you pray, things shift. Because you know what it feels like to be refined. And refinement births authenticity. That's what this world is starving for: people who've walked through fire and didn't lose their song. And my child, you are one of them. You finally did it. You didn't run when the heat increased. You stayed, you trusted, you wept, and you worried through it. And because you did, the next season of your life will be marked by fire too, but not the kind that breaks. The kind that ignites others. The kind that spreads light, truth, and healing. The kind that testifies, I've been through the fire and I am still burning with purpose. Stay with me. What I've begun in the fire, I will finish in glory. There were days when even standing up felt like lifting a mountain. You kept going, but your soul was dragging behind. You showed up in rooms where no one knew you were falling apart inside. You smiled to hide the ache. You stayed quiet because you didn't think anyone would understand the heaviness pressing on your chest. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. It was emotional. It was a heaviness that no words could describe. You believed you were alone in that struggle, carrying a burden too big for one heart to hold. But while you were collapsing under the weight of everything you didn't know how to fix, I stepped in quietly, gently, but completely. I didn't just walk beside you. I lifted what was too much for you and put it on my shoulders. You weren't abandoned, you were being upheld. While you blamed yourself for being weak, I was honoring you for not giving up. You thought your silence meant separation from me. But in truth, it drew me even closer. Because my love doesn't wait for perfection. It responds to pain. The pressure you were under was never yours to handle alone. And though you didn't always feel me, I was there absorbing the weight of your sorrow, stabilizing the parts of you that were crumbling, and keeping your spirit from collapsing entirely. That wasn't your strength that carried you through those nights. It was mine. You didn't endure because you were fearless. You endured because I was holding the fears you were too tired to fight. I felt every emotion that overwhelmed you. I saw how you kept showing up for others when no one showed up for you. I witnessed how you gave love while receiving very little in return. I watched you pour out your energy into prayers, dreams, and responsibilities even when your heart was depleted. You weren't unnoticed. You weren't unseen. I was in every shadow, every silent cry, every sleepless night. You never walked a single step without my presence wrapped around you. I wasn't waiting on the other side of the valley, I was in the darkest part of it with you. And not once did I let go. You assumed that because you didn't feel a dramatic rescue, I wasn't working. But the truth is, my greatest acts of protection happen in stillness. You were being preserved when you thought you were being punished. You were being rescued in ways that didn't make noise but made all the difference. Every time your heart whispered, "I can't take any more," I lightened the load before it broke you. You didn't always recognize the shift, but it was there. That unexpected moment of peace. That random word of encouragement. That brief rest in your spirit, that was me. That was evidence that you weren't carrying this by yourself. And now, as you look back, you're beginning to see it. The moments you thought you were the weakest were actually the moments I was the strongest in you. The days you thought would crush you became the days I reinforced you. The strength you have today was born from the weight I lifted for you. You didn't collapse because I caught you. You didn't drown because I was the hand keeping your head above water. And even now, I'm still doing it. You don't have to carry it all. You never did. I'm still here, still steady, still stronger than whatever presses against you. I am not a distant God. I am your shelter, your shield, your unseen strength. My beloved, you finally did it. You let go without losing everything. You kept walking when the weight should have immobilized you. You allowed me to carry what your soul couldn't handle, and because of that, you're still moving forward. You're lighter now, not because life got easier, but because you're no longer carrying it alone. And this is how we'll continue, from strength to strength, from weight to worship. Every step you take from here will be covered in grace, because I'm not just behind you, I'm carrying you still. You saw the door shut and thought it was rejection. You knocked, you waited, and when nothing opened, your heart sank. It felt like disappointment. It felt like failure. It felt like something good was taken from you without explanation. You wrestled with the loss, questioned your decisions, and asked me more than once, was that my chance? Did I miss it? But what you couldn't see then, and what I need you to understand now, is that not every closed opportunity is the enemy. Some are the shield I raised to guard you from what looked promising on the surface but would have harmed you in ways you weren't equipped to see. My silence in those moments wasn't disinterest, it was intervention. It was me, stepping between you and what would have pulled you off the path I prepared. You mourned the ending, but you had no idea what I was rescuing you from. That connection you tried to salvage wasn't meant to continue. That door you kept revisiting was not part of your calling. You prayed for clarity, and I gave it through closure. I know how hard it was to let go. I know how deeply you invested your hope in what could have been. But I need you to know this, beloved. Just because something was familiar doesn't mean it was safe. Just because something was attractive doesn't mean it was a line. You wanted it because it made sense to your present, but I blocked it because it posed a threat to your future. When I close something, it's never without intention. I am not a careless God. Every no I gave was wrapped in foresight. I saw what you couldn't, the aftermath, the weight, the distractions, the delays. I saw how it would slow your growth, how it would stretch you in the wrong direction, how it would drain your peace and dilute your focus. So I shut it down. And yes, it hurt. But what hurts isn't always harmful. Sometimes it's healing disguised in discomfort. The pain of letting go with the price of being aligned with my best. You asked me for protection, and this is what it looked like. Not just shielding you from physical harm, but preserving your time, your calling, your emotional space. I was guarding what I placed inside of you. Now that the noise is quiet and the dust has settled, you're beginning to see glimpses of why I had to intervene. You're starting to feel the freedom that came with that closed chapter. Your vision is becoming clearer. Your spirit is lighter. And if you look deeper, you'll notice that I've already been opening new doors, ones you didn't even consider before. They were hidden behind your disappointment. But now that your hands are no longer clinging to the wrong handle, you're free to reach for what I've truly prepared. The new that is coming doesn't compete with the old, it outshines it completely. What's ahead carries my fingerprint, my timing, and your full readiness. And this is the shift, my child. You no longer need to panic when something ends. You no longer need to beg for doors to open that I've locked for a reason. You're learning that my redirection is never random, it's mercy in motion. From now on, when something closes, you'll say, God must be planning something better. That's not denial. That's discernment. That's the maturity you've grown into, where you trust my guidance even when you don't yet understand the map. You've crossed over from chasing what looks right to choosing what is right. You stopped making decisions from desperation and started moving in confidence. And because of that, you are now positioned for access that no man can block. You finally did it. You let go of what I closed, and you didn't lose yourself in the process. You gave me the space to do what only I can do, clear the way. And because you trusted me enough to walk away from what you wanted, I will lead you straight into what you never knew you needed. There are doors ahead that don't just open, they stay open. And when you walk through them, you'll realize nothing that was taken from you compares to what I'm bringing to you. Keep walking. This time, the doors will not only open, they will welcome you home. There came a time when everything around you seemed unclear. The road ahead blurred, and every logical direction turned into a question mark. You tried to make plans, to organize, to force things into a shape that looked like control, but nothing responded the way you expected. It felt like walking through fog with no map, no certainty, no confirmation. And yet, in the middle of that uncertainty, something beautiful happened. You chose to believe me anyway. You didn't have all the answers. You didn't know how long it would take. You weren't even sure if you'd make it. But something deep within your spirit whispered, keep going. And instead of freezing in confusion, you moved one uncertain step at a time, guided by nothing more than my quiet assurance that I was with you. That was trust. Not the kind that shows up when everything is aligned, but the kind that is born when alignment disappears and all you have is a word from me. You didn't know it then, but every step you took through that confusion was rewriting your story. The detours you didn't understand were actually turning points. The delays that frustrated you were building something that couldn't be rushed. I wasn't just guiding you through a storm, I was shaping who you were becoming on the journey. You learned to stop depending on what you could predict and started leaning into what you could sense. You began to recognize my voice not by volume, but by the way it brought peace to your chaos. That's when things began to shift, not around you but within you. What you thought was aimless wandering was actually alignment unfolding. While others demanded explanations before moving forward, you walked by faith, trusting that I was doing something sacred in the silence. And I was. That uncertainty was not a mistake. It was a classroom. And you passed the test not because you always felt confident, but because you chose me over control. That choice changed everything. You stepped out even when the path didn't look promising. You obeyed even when the instructions were unclear. And that obedience created ripple effects you haven't even fully seen yet. The places your feet touched while trusting me will produce fruit long after the memory of that confusion fades. Your trust became a weapon. A quiet, relentless weapon against the lies that tried to paralyze you. Every time you moved forward without proof, you silenced fear. Every time you surrendered the need to figure it out, you created space for me to move in ways that only I can. That's why doors opened without keys. That's why provision came when you didn't plan for it. That's why people entered your life at just the right moment, because I was responding to your trust. You didn't need a blueprint. You just needed to believe that I wouldn't let you walk into destruction. And because you did, I turned that uncertain path into a divine highway. Now look at you. You've been shaped by a faith that doesn't flinch when clarity disappears. You've become a person who doesn't panic in the unknown. Your heart knows that if I said go, there's something ahead worth reaching. And that trust, my child, is rare. It's the kind of trust that causes blessings to locate you. It draws favor not because of what you have, but because of what you've chosen to believe in the absence of certainty. You're not walking blind, you're walking bold. Not because the steps are easy, but because you know who's ordering them. And that kind of trust, it doesn't continue as you let me. You finally did it. You trusted me, not just with your prayers, but with your direction. And that decision has altered your legacy. Because you refused to stop when the signs disappeared, I am now leading you to a place where the scenery will make up for every season of not knowing. And when others ask how you got there, your answer will be simple. I followed the one who knew the way, even when I didn't. Keep trusting. What's ahead will prove that every uncertain step was worth it. There was a moment when you realized holding tighter was only making the pain grow stronger. You tried to fix it, reshape it, plan around it until you exhausted every ounce of strength trying to bend reality to your will. It wasn't rebellion. It was desperation. You just wanted something to work. You just wanted to stop hurting. But in the process of grasping for control, you found your spirit slipping into places I never intended you to stay. And then, when your arms grew tired, when your heart could no longer carry the weight of the unknown, you finally did something that shifted everything. You released it. You stopped trying to force it. You stopped analyzing every possible outcome. You opened your hands and said, God, I can't carry this anymore. And in that instant, I stepped in. I had been waiting for that moment. Not because I needed your weakness to act, but because I wouldn't force myself into a space where control had taken residence. Your surrender made room for me. Your decision to stop striving became the very thing that activated my presence in a deeper way. You thought surrender meant giving up, but it was actually the key to unlocking divine intervention. What you laid down, I picked up. What you released, I redeemed. You didn't lose by letting go, you began to win. Because in that space of surrender, you invited heaven's wisdom, timing, and power into what you were never meant to fix on your own. Letting go wasn't easy. It felt like losing a piece of your identity. It felt like standing on the edge of something too uncertain. But what you didn't see then was that surrender wasn't empty, it was a handoff. You handed me the burden, and I exchanged it for direction. You gave me your questions, and I began crafting answers beyond your comprehension. You trusted me with what felt like chaos, and I began rebuilding order from the inside out. The doors you couldn't open, I began to unlock. The people you couldn't reach, I began to move in their hearts. The situations you couldn't figure out, I began orchestrating in ways that looked impossible, because I am not limited by what limits you. Surrender is not weakness. It is wisdom. It says, I've done all I can do. Now I need God to do what only He can do. And you did that. You walked away from the urge to control, and you chose to trust. Not passively, but courageously. Because it takes courage to leave outcomes in my hands. It takes faith to release something and believe that I care about it even more than you do. That is what you discovered. That is what brought the shift. It wasn't louder prayers or harder work. It was quiet release. And that's why things began to move. Not instantly, not always visibly, but undeniably. Now look around. What once felt stuck is beginning to shift. What once felt distant is drawing near. What once felt like it would never change is showing signs of my fingerprints. Because you let go, I've begun to restore. And not just restore, but exceed. My movement is never limited to returning things to how they were. I bring beauty out of places you thought were ruin. I bring redemption from what looked irreversible. All because you stopped trying to do my job and trusted me enough to do it. You finally did it. You surrendered. Not because you lost hope, but because you placed your hope in me. And that single act has rerouted your story. There is no going back to who you were before that moment. You are walking in a new kind of strength now, not one built on effort, but one rooted in rest. Rest in knowing that the one who holds the universe is holding your life. That I won't drop what you placed in my hands. Keep walking. What I am about to release through your surrender will be far greater than what you ever tried to hold on to. In a world where compromise is celebrated and shortcuts are often rewarded, you quietly made a different decision. When no eyes were on you, when no applause could be gained, you chose what was right instead of what was easy. I saw it. In fact, I never missed a moment. While others may have overlooked the weight of your sacrifice, I marked it in heaven. You turned down opportunities that would have advanced your name but compromised your soul. You walked away from conversations that could have earned you influence but would have tainted your peace. You could have manipulated the outcome, justified a lie, or hidden behind excuses, but instead, you remain honest, even when honesty cost you something. That choice made in silence echoed loudly in my presence. Integrity isn't tested in front of crowds. It's revealed when no one is looking, when character is more important than comfort. And you, my child, have proven that who you are in secret is even stronger than what you show in public. That pleases me more than you can imagine. I don't measure success the way the world does. I measure your choices by how closely they reflect my heart. And when you chose truth over convenience, you mirrored my nature. Every time you resisted the urge to cut corners, every time you returned what wasn't yours, every time you kept a promise no one would have noticed if you broke it mattered. It shaped the path I could trust you with. Your integrity created space for heaven's favor. Not because you earned blessings, but because your purity of heart allowed me to entrust you with more. When the world offers quick results, I look for those willing to grow slowly with righteousness. And that's who you've become. You've cultivated roots that run deep, not for show, but for stability. So when the winds come, and they will, you won't be moved because your soul isn't anchored in outcomes, it's anchored in obedience. I want you to understand something sacred. Integrity will open doors that talent alone cannot. It will preserve you when others fall. It will carry you when fame fades and silence returns. And it will be the reason my presence never lifts from you. You may never receive earthly recognition for the times you walked away from temptation. You might never be applauded for the nights you told the truth when it would have been easier to lie. But heaven took note. Angels celebrated every hidden act of purity. I recorded every moment you chose light over shadows. And now, those private victories are about to produce public favor. Not because you sought it, but because your heart made room for it. The world may praise charisma, but I crown character. And what you did in the quiet places has prepared you for influence that won't crush your spirit. You didn't know it, but I was testing your readiness not by how well you performed under pressure, but by how faithfully you responded in secret. That's how I promote through purity, not popularity. And now, you're standing at a threshold, not because you fought your way here, but because you humbled yourself in moments that only I saw. That humility is your covering. That integrity is your strength. It has built something no storm can tear down. And I promise you this: what's coming next in your life will be protected by the foundation of your honesty. And no scheme will prosper against you because you've walked uprightly. And no slander will hold you because your name hath been written in my vindication. You finally did it. You chose me when no one else knew. You honored my ways when silence was your only reward. And now, the tables are turning. The honor that's coming is not a trophy, it's a testimony. A testimony that says, this is what happens when a child of God chooses character over compromise. Keep walking with that same heart. What you built in the unseen is now ready to shine in the light, and I will be the one to reveal it in my perfect timing. While others were chasing spotlight and recognition, you were being molded in a space where no one applauded, no one noticed, and no one celebrated your effort. And still you remained faithful. While others ran toward platforms, you stayed rooted in the quiet work I called you to. I saw you serve when it wasn't convenient. I saw you grow when no one was clapping. I saw you develop strength that had nothing to do with status and everything to do with substance. This is where true greatness begins, not in stages or crowds, but in silence and consistency. You were not overlooked, you were being established. You weren't being delayed, you were being developed. And I was with you the entire time, shaping a character that could carry the destiny I designed for you. The shadows are sacred. That's where hearts are purified. That's where intentions are tested. You didn't chase attention, you pursued alignment. While others rushed ahead for recognition, you stayed behind to listen. And that posture of humility created a depth in you that can't be faked. You didn't just learn how to speak truth, you learned how to live it. You didn't just quote faith, you became an example of it. You didn't need praise to persist. You didn't need validation to stay devoted. You let the quiet stretch you, and now your roots run deeper than anyone knows. That's why you're still standing. That's why storms couldn't take you out. Because while the world saw nothing happening, heaven saw a foundation being laid, unshakable, unmovable, eternal. You see, growth in the shadows is different. It's not motivated by outcome. It's not dependent on response. It's based on obedience. You followed me when there was no spotlight to affirm you. You followed me when the only reward was intimacy. And that trust, that walk, that choice to remain faithful in hidden places, that's what gave your character its weight. I don't elevate people based on image. I raise up those whose identity hath been forged in private, whose character is sealed by truth. You are one of them. And now, because you didn't demand a stage, I can trust you with one. Because you didn't chase platforms, I can send you into places where your voice will carry influence without losing its purity. What you built when no one saw it is what now makes you ready for what everyone else will see. You know who you are not because people told you, but because I confirmed it in the quiet hours when you questioned your place. You found your worth not in results, but in relationship. That's why you're not shaken by delay or threatened by someone else's success. Your roots are secure. You don't need to compete. You don't need to perform. What I've placed within you was refined in fire and grown in stillness. And what is grown in stillness cannot be stolen by noise. You finally did it. You became who I called you to be without needing the world to notice. And now that you've grown in the unseen, I will begin revealing what I've been preparing. Not to impress others, but to impact lives. Not to make you famous, but to make me known through you. And the best part is, because your identity isn't wrapped in visibility, success will never corrupt your soul. You will rise with clarity. You will influence with compassion. You will lead with integrity. All because you allowed me to shape your character when it wasn't glamorous to do so. The shadows weren't punishment, they were promotion in disguise. And the light you are walking into now is simply a reflection of what I've already done within you. So continue to walk in humility. Let your actions speak louder than your words. Let your life remain rooted in quiet obedience. Because the character you cultivated in the unseen is the very reason you're ready for what's coming next. And I'm so proud of you for staying planted when others fled, for trusting me when no one else saw, for growing when it would have been easier to give up. The world will see the fruit, but I will never forget the soil you watered in secret. There was a time when your eyes were fixed on what everyone else said. You measured yourself against others, longing to be seen, to be accepted, to feel significant. You chased after things you thought would complete you: titles, affirmation, moments of approval that vanished just as quickly as they came. It wasn't because you were shallow, it was because you were searching. You were hungry for something real, something that lasted. The world dangled its glitter in front of you, and for a while, it almost convinced you that your worth depended on how loud your success looked to others. But then something shifted inside you. You grew tired of the noise. You saw through the illusion. And one day, without telling anyone, you quietly turned your focus from what was temporary to what was eternal. That moment, though invisible to the world, caused celebration in heaven. When you stopped running after the approval of men and started pursuing my presence, the atmosphere changed. You didn't need an audience anymore. You needed alignment. You didn't crave applause, you longed for peace. And that longing brought you back to me, not out of fear, but out of love. You started seeking me, not for what I could give you, but because your heart finally realized that I was what you needed all along. I watched that transformation happen in layers, not overnight, but moment by moment, choice by choice. The more you released the pressure to impress, the more you opened yourself to something deeper, something sacred. Seeking me was not a retreat from the world. It was a return to who you truly are. You began to listen more than you spoke. You started sitting with me without an agenda. You stopped rushing past my presence and began dwelling in it. That's when healing began to flow in places you didn't even know were wounded. The emptiness that applause could never fill finally began to overflow with joy. You were just seeking comfort, you were seeking connection. And that connection wrote your desires. You no longer needed to be elevated by the world's standards because you were finally grounded in my truth. You discovered that I don't measure your life by likes, metrics, or recognition. I measure it by love, devotion, and surrender. And because you sought me above all, I began to release things that your striving could never produce. I began to open doors that didn't depend on effort, but on obedience. I began to pour out wisdom, confidence, and rest, not because you earned it, but because you came to the well where true fulfillment lives. When you seek me first, everything else finds its proper place. You don't have to hustle for identity. You already have it. You don't have to beg for purpose. It flows from your relationship with me. And you, my child, made that exchange. You turned down the counterfeit to receive the eternal. You stopped bowing to the expectations of culture and chose the freedom of walking in truth. That decision echoed through the heavens. Now, you live differently. You are no longer pulled by the winds of public opinion. You're anchored. You've tasted the difference between popularity and presence, and you've chosen well. The world will continue to chase after noise, but you know now where stillness lives. You know where your strength is renewed. You know whose voice leads you home. And I promise you, those who seek me will never be forsaken. Your pursuit of me has planted seeds that will bear fruit for generations to come. And I will honor that pursuit, not just with blessings but with legacy. You finally did it. You traded distraction for devotion. And that trade is what makes everything that comes next unshakably beautiful. You felt like time was slipping through your fingers. You watched days turn to weeks, and weeks to months, and still, nothing seemed to move. Your prayers sat like unopened letters. Your efforts felt unseen. You looked at others racing ahead, doors opening for them, celebrations marking their progress, and you asked, "What about me?" You weren't bitter. You were just tired. You questioned if I had forgotten you. But what you couldn't see in those long, silent seasons was the sacred work I was doing beneath the surface. Waiting isn't punishment. It's preservation. It's where I do my most intricate shaping, slowly, gently, deeply. You were waiting for results. I was preparing your capacity. You were asking for answers. I was building endurance. The time you thought was empty was actually full of hidden movement. I wasn't standing still, I was strengthening you. You see, blessings are not just about arrival, they're about readiness. And I love you too much to give you something prematurely. I didn't want to give you something you'd have to recover from later. So I slowed the pace, not to frustrate you, but to protect what I've placed inside you. You thought delay meant denial, but it meant design. I was aligning people, preparing atmospheres, and even softening your heart for what's coming next. It's hard to see when you're in it. I know. It feels endless. The days blur. The motivation fades. But you stayed. You didn't run away, even when walking forward felt like walking through a fog. You kept your heart open, even though disappointment tried to make it callous. That posture of persistence in the unknown is what separated you from who you used to be. You're not the same person who first entered that season. You've gained patience, yes, but also vision, wisdom, and a gentleness that can't be rushed. You've developed eyes that recognize my hand even when it moves quietly, and that discernment will protect what's coming. Because now, I am bringing you into a season that will make sense of the wait. The blessing you're stepping into isn't loud or shallow, it's rooted, stable, and lasting. It won't vanish overnight. It won't demand that you compromise to keep it. It was made for you, and you've been made ready for it. You no longer need to prove yourself to receive it. You've already passed tests the world didn't see. The silent endurance, the inner growth, the prayers you prayed when nothing made sense, those became the soil for this season's harvest. This isn't just reward, it's revelation. You're about to understand why I made you wait. And here's the beauty of it. What I'm giving you now is something that time can't take away. Because it was not built by ambition, it was formed by obedience. It's not held together by appearance, it's sustained by truth. You didn't manipulate it. You didn't chase it. You positioned yourself, and now it's finding you. The waiting didn't weaken your faith, it refined it. And because of that, you'll be able to carry this blessing with joy, not fear. You'll walk in it without wondering if you're worthy, because your waiting has already proven your heart is trustworthy. You finally did it. You trusted me when the clock kept ticking with no answers in sight. You surrendered your timeline. You allowed me to prepare you, not just provide for you. And now, the door that's opening will stay open not because of force, but because of favor. The people who once questioned your pace will watch you rise with grace. The spaces that once felt like delay will now feel like destiny. And through it all, you'll carry a quiet strength, a reminder that the best things are not rushed, they are revealed. And this, my beloved, is only the beginning of what your patience has made possible. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't fail. It wasn't because you lacked faith or because your prayers weren't strong enough. I know it felt like you were being overlooked, like the doors you were knocking on refused to move. I saw your confusion when you gave your best, only to face stillness on the other side. But my child, not every delay is denial. Some delays are divine preparation. I wasn't trying to frustrate your journey, I was creating space for something far greater than what you asked for. What you thought was a closed chapter was me gently holding back the curtain until the right scene was ready. I love you too deeply to give you something halfway complete or half a line. So I waited, not because I enjoy watching you ache, but because I wanted to give you something that could endure. You asked me to move quickly, but I saw the weight of what you were asking for, and I wanted to make sure it wouldn't crush you. So I adjusted the pace. Not out of punishment, but from protection. Not out of delay, but from design. There were things I had to clear from your path. There were voices that needed to fall silent before you could hear me clearly. There were lessons I needed to engrave in your heart before I could trust you with the next level. You prayed for advancement, and I gave you alignment first. Because when you move forward out of sync, it leads to exhaustion. But when you walk in rhythm with me, every step becomes peace even when it stretches you. I know you were ready in your eyes. You felt eager. You were willing. And your heart was open. But readiness in spirit doesn't always mean readiness in structure. I had to build endurance in places you didn't think needed it. I had to prune distractions you were unaware of. I had to slow the motion around you so I could steady the movement within you. And now, because you didn't force the door open on your own, you're going to walk through one that I'm opening with purpose. You'll see that what I have been orchestrating in secret will soon be visible in ways that make everything make sense. You see, had I given you what you asked for in your original timing, it would have satisfied for a moment, but slipped through your hands later. I don't bless temporarily, I bless with legacy. I don't offer fleeting gain, I offer eternal fruit. And for fruit to last, the soil must be tilled, the roots deepened, and the conditions prepared. That's what the delay was about. I was nurturing the unseen. I was fortifying your future. I was eliminating everything that would have corrupted what I wanted to build in your life. You may not have recognized it, but I was answering your prayer by withholding what looked good so I could release what is best. And now, you're walking into the fullness of a promise I've been refining. It may not come with fireworks or flashing lights, but it will carry peace. It may not look like what you first envisioned, but it will exceed your original request. Because this time, it's not born from haste, it's born from heaven. You've been stretched, yes, but also expanded. You've grown in ways you never imagined, and that growth has qualified you to hold what's coming without breaking. You won't have to strive to keep it. You won't have to fear it slipping away, because it's not built on shaky ground. It's built on surrender, maturity, and trust. You finally did it. You embraced the waiting without forcing your own way. And now, the blessing I'm bringing won't just fill your hands, it will nourish your soul. You'll realize the delay wasn't wasted time. It was sacred preparation. And as you step into what I've been holding for you, you'll see that my timing wasn't late, it was perfect. Stay close, beloved. I've saved something better for you, and now it's ready. You never demanded recognition. You never pushed to be noticed. Even when you had every reason to defend yourself, to prove your worth, to announce your efforts, you remained quiet, steady, and grounded. You chose to serve rather than shine. You knelt when others ran to the front. You listened when you could have spoken. You gave without expectation, and you stayed faithful when no one praised your contribution. That posture didn't go unnoticed in heaven. While the world measures greatness by volume and visibility, I measure it by posture and purity. And your humility, chosen over and over again, has become the very reason I can now elevate you without the promotion destroying your soul. It's not easy to remain low when everything around you shouts to be high. But you didn't chase spotlight, you chased me. You didn't seek validation, you sought presence. You knew that titles fade and applause is temporary, but character echoes through eternity. And because you laid down your right to be first, I'm now bringing you into a place where you'll be trusted with more than you imagined. Not because you competed for it, but because you were prepared for it. You've built something sacred by choosing to wait for my timing instead of forcing your way through man-made doors. That's rare, and it is precious to me. You've learned that real power doesn't need to advertise itself. It moves gently, confidently, knowing that heaven backs it. That's the kind of spirit you carry now, not loud, but undeniable. You've walked through moments when you could have exalted yourself and won favor with people, but you waited on me. You didn't push for status. You let me define your significance. And that decision, that inner restraint, is what created space for me to release what only I can give. True honor. Not fleeting attention. Not shallow applause. But lasting, anchored elevation that is born from obedience and anchored in righteousness. Honor that comes from me cannot be stolen, cannot be sabotaged, and cannot be revoked by man. It's not tied to popularity, it's tied to purpose. It doesn't fade with trends, it deepens over time. And now, because you refuse to chase it, it is coming for you. Opportunities will find you not because of branding, but because of trustworthiness. Hearts will be drawn to your words not because they are impressive, but because they are anointed. Influence will rise not for your glory, but for mine, because your humility has proven that you can be a vessel, not a spectacle. Do not mistake your gentle spirit for weakness. It has been your strength all along. In a world that idolizes pride, you've modeled what it means to walk low so I can lift you high. And this lifting won't feel heavy, it will feel natural. Because your identity isn't in the role, it's in the relationship. You know who you are, not because of platform, but because of proximity. And now, others will begin to see what I've seen all along. The hidden strength, the quiet courage, the steady endurance, the willingness to be last, knowing that I will make you first not in the way of the world, but in the way of the kingdom. You finally did it. You chose humility even when you had every reason to take another path. And now, what I place in your hands won't just bless you, it will honor the decisions you made in secret. You'll begin to experience favor that feels familiar, because it's the harvest of every seed you sowed when no one clapped. The honor coming won't just rest on your life, it will flow through it. You will lift others as I lift you. You will encourage others as I increase your reach. And it will be effortless, because you didn't build it through striving, you received it through surrender. Keep walking humbly. I have so much more to reveal through you. You used to carry the weight of being misunderstood. You wanted so badly for others to see your heart, to know your intentions, to recognize the purity behind your efforts. There were times you felt invisible, not because you weren't present, but because your worth wasn't acknowledged in the ways you hoped. You wrestled with the pressure to explain yourself, to defend your journey, to justify why you believed the way you did, why you stayed when others walked away, why you kept loving when others chose distance. But eventually, slowly and painfully, you learned that your identity isn't built on their acceptance, it's rooted in my affirmation. You stopped needing everyone to understand you because you finally understood that I always have. You stopped trying to impress because you realized you were already known completely, deeply, eternally known. And that realization set you free. Free from the performance. Free from the exhausting cycle of trying to convince people who were never assigned to your story. Free from tailoring your journey to earn applause you no longer crave. My child, your faith spoke for you. Not in grand gestures, but in the quiet way you held on when everything around you suggested you should let go. You believed in me when it cost you comfort. You followed me when it cost you approval. And that faith didn't just move mountains, it moved my heart. I never needed you to be loud. I needed you to be real. And you were. You didn't shout your convictions from rooftops, you lived them in the valley. You didn't wave your obedience as a banner, you carried it silently, step by faithful step. I saw how you kept choosing truth over popularity. I watched as you allowed me to shape your motives, refine your desires, and remove your need for validation from human eyes. You could have chased after recognition. Instead, you chased after me. And that chase didn't go unnoticed, it became the proof of your heart's devotion. You didn't just say you trusted me, you walked like you did, even when the road felt unsteady. That's what I honor. That's what I elevate. Not polished performance, but raw dependence. Not scripted perfection, but surrendered authenticity. You didn't need a stage to be faithful. You didn't need applause to be devoted. You simply needed me, and you made me enough. And because of that, the world's permission no longer has power over you. You're no longer bound by their opinions. You no longer crumble under their silence. You don't shrink when overlooked, because you've been seen by the one who sees everything. Your identity doesn't sway with the crowd, it's anchored in my truth. And that unshakable trust is why I'm opening new territory in your life. Now, as I begin to elevate your voice, promote your purpose, and draw others toward your light, it will not feel like striving. It will feel like fulfillment. You won't need to explain your way through the doors I open, they'll be shaped by the faith you already lived. You finally did it, you stopped chasing approval and started resting in my confirmation. That shift changed everything. And because you allowed me to be your source of confidence, you now carry a boldness that doesn't depend on circumstance. A quiet boldness. A steady strength. The kind that only grows in the soil of surrender. You're no longer proving yourself, you're walking in proof. Your life is the evidence. Your peace is the testimony. Your endurance is the answer to the question of who you really are. And that is enough. I'm proud of the way you've handled misunderstanding. I'm proud of the way you've walked away from the need to be seen, trusting that the one who matters most never took his eyes off you. Stay in this posture. Continue walking in that settled assurance. Because I'm just getting started, and the recognition that's coming won't be for your ego, it will be for my glory shining through you. And you are ready. You had every reason to stay angry. The words that were spoken to you, the betrayals that cut deep, the silence that followed the wounds, they were real. You didn't imagine the pain. You didn't exaggerate what you went through. And yet, even when the apology never came, even when the ones who hurt you continued on as if nothing had happened, you made a decision that most wouldn't dare to make. You chose to release them. Not because they deserved it, not because what they did was acceptable, but because you refused to let bitterness become your companion. That decision didn't happen in a single moment. It happened in layers, in the quiet of your heart, in the wrestling of your thoughts, in the aching surrender that whispered, "I let it go." Forgiveness is not weakness. It is power restrained. It is the courage to say, "This will not define me. This will not live in me." You didn't wait for justice before you extended mercy. You didn't require reconciliation before you chose healing. That makes you different. That makes you like me. I walked that same road. I stood in front of people who spit in my face, who mocked what they didn't understand, who rejected the very love that came to save them, and still, I said, "Father, forgive them." When you forgave in secret, you echoed my voice through your pain. That's the kind of strength heaven stands in awe of. And I know it wasn't easy. Forgiveness cost you something. It meant giving up your right to stay hurt. It meant loosening your grip on what seemed to validate your suffering. It meant choosing peace over vengeance. And that choice, that invisible, inner, powerful choice, did not go unnoticed. Every time you whispered, "I forgive," heaven rejoiced. Every time you resisted the urge to remind them of how deeply they wounded you, your spirit grew. You weren't just setting them free, you were releasing yourself from the chain of resentment that would have robbed you of joy. You traded bitterness for freedom, and that exchange has now become the gateway to blessings that can't be touched by pain. You didn't need them to say "I'm sorry" before you chose to move on. That's a rare kind of love. That's not human logic, that's divine nature flowing through you. You let go of what you could have carried for years, and in doing so, you made space in your heart for what I wanted to pour in: clarity, comfort, and restoration. You now walk lighter, not because they changed, but because you chose not to carry the weight of their actions any longer. You chose to live untangled. You chose to be whole, even if the people who broke you never tried to fix what they shattered. That's what makes your forgiveness so powerful. It was pure, and didn't come with condition. It didn't wait for closure. It came from a heart that values peace over pride. And now, that peace is beginning to overflow. The things that used to trigger old wounds now pass by without taking your joy. The emotions that used to flood your soul now fall flat against the wall of healing you've built through grace. And because of that, I am positioning you for a new level of influence, not to showcase your strength, but to reflect my mercy. People will be drawn to your kindness, not realizing it was born in the fire of betrayal. But I know. I saw it all. I saw the nights you cried and still chose love the next day. You finally did it. You forgave without conditions. And because of that, you're now free to walk into a future that won't be polluted by past pain. You don't need apologies to be at peace. You already have my peace. And from this point on, your story won't be marked by who hurt you. It will be marked by how you healed. And your healing will be a testimony. Your softness will speak louder than their silence ever could. And I will honor it. I will multiply it. I will use it to bring others into their own freedom. You reflect me more than you know, and I am proud of you. There was a time when chaos used to shake you. When trouble came near, your thoughts would race, your heart would pound, and fear would cloud your vision. You searched for solutions, scrambled for stability, trying to grab control of things that never belonged in your hands to begin with. You thought peace was something you'd find once the battle ended, once the noise stopped, once life felt predictable. But what I taught you through nights of restlessness, through days of uncertainty, through moments of utter exhaustion was that peace isn't a place. Peace is a person. And you discovered me in that revelation. You stopped waiting for the storm to pass and started choosing stillness inside of it. You stopped asking the storm to be silent and started silencing the storm inside of you. That shift changed everything. Because the waves didn't have to stop for you to start breathing differently. The wind didn't have to calm for your spirit to grow quiet. You began to anchor your soul in truth instead of circumstance. And that truth gave you footing when everything else was moving. It wasn't instant. You wrestled with it. There were moments you took 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. But gradually, steadily, you began to find a rhythm in me. You stopped reacting. You started resting. And not the kind of rest that's passive or weak. No, this with a kind of peace that comes from knowing I am in control even when nothing around you makes sense. You walked through situations where others would have fallen apart and you remained. Not because you felt strong, but because you were being held by something unshakable. You felt the difference now. You've tasted what it's like to wake up with a quiet heart even when the day ahead is uncertain. That's not denial. That's not numbness. That's maturity. That's trust. That's the reward of someone who stopped letting storms define their direction. You learned to stop looking at the waves and started keeping your eyes on me. That focus is what turned panic into presence. You no longer need all the answers before you exhale. You've realized that peace isn't about everything going right, it's about knowing I'm still with you when everything feels wrong. And that assurance has given you a new kind of confidence. The kind that doesn't have to shout. The kind that doesn't need to be seen. The kind that simply is because it's rooted in something deeper than explanation. Others will see it in you. They already have. They see the way you carry yourself differently now. The way you speak with calm. The way you respond with grace. The way you sit in spaces that once caused anxiety, now fully grounded in peace. And they'll ask how. They'll wonder what changed. And you'll know, it wasn't the absence of trouble. It was the awareness of my presence. You learned to walk in the very peace I promised would guard your heart and mind. And now, it's become your atmosphere. You bring it into every room. You carry it into every conversation. You release it without effort, because it's no longer something you visit, it's who you've become. You finally did it. You stopped waiting for life to calm down in order to be okay. You found peace in me, and now, no storm can steal it. Yes, the winds may rise again. The waves may crash. But you won't be shaken the way you used to be. Because peace now lives within you, and it was born not from perfect moments, but from holy surrender. Keep walking in that. Let it lead your decisions. Let it shape your tone. Let it govern your choices. You're not the same anymore, and the storms ahead will have no power over a heart that's anchored in my presence. You may not have realized the impact you were making while you endured in silence. You weren't on a stage. You weren't surrounded by people cheering you on. You didn't announce your suffering or post your struggles for attention. You simply stayed. You simply endured. And that quiet choice to keep walking, to keep trusting, to keep breathing when it felt like the wind had been knocked out of you became the very thing that caused tremors in the spiritual realm. What you thought was unnoticed faithfulness was, in fact, a roar in the courts of heaven. I saw you when you got up on mornings you wanted to hide. I saw you push through the pain without making it anyone else's burden. I watched you keep showing up when everything inside of you screamed to disappear. You weren't trying to impress anyone, you were just trying to survive. But even then, even in the smallest movements forward, you were moving mountains. Because you didn't quit. Because you kept believing. Because you held on to me not loudly, but firmly. You didn't realize that your endurance, though soft in the world's eyes, was resounding in the spirit. Angels stood with you. Demons fled from you. Not because of your volume, but because of your consistency. You didn't need recognition to keep going. That's what made it powerful. You didn't require affirmation to remain faithful. You were moved by conviction, not convenience. While others shouted for attention, you whispered prayers no one heard. While many looked for platforms to validate their calling, you chose to be planted where I placed you, knowing that I would make the fruit grow in due time. That quiet decision made you dangerous not to people, but to darkness. Because darkness fears those who don't need to be seen to stay strong. The world doesn't understand that kind of strength. They think impact must be loud. They think change must come with noise. But the kingdom doesn't operate that way. I move through the unnoticed. I breathe through the unseen. And your life, your quiet, faithful, relentless pursuit of me has made more impact than you realize. You have become a testimony without needing to speak it. You are walking proof that devotion doesn't need an audience. You have shown that even in silence, obedience speaks volumes. And now, because of your endurance, I am enlarging your reach. Not because you persevered, but because you proved I could trust you with it. Your patience under pressure became the foundation for what I am now building. I'm giving you more not to overwhelm you, but because your quiet faith has made room for greater authority. You didn't earn it by effort. You received it through surrender. You didn't take it by force. You grew into it through perseverance. And now, the weight you carried is being exchanged for the weight of my glory. What once pressed you down will now become the platform that lifts others. You finally did it. You embraced the silence, not as punishment, but as preparation. And in that silence, you didn't shrink, you grew. You became rooted. You became steady. You became unshakable. And now, the strength formed in hidden places will begin to shine, not because you shout louder, but because my presence radiates from within you. People will feel it. They won't be able to explain it, but they will know that peace walks with you, that power flows through you, that hope is stirred when you enter the room. Because what you carry wasn't built through applause, it was born in the waiting, in the enduring, in the choosing me when no one else was watching. Let that remain your rhythm. You don't need noise to make a difference. You don't need crowds to carry my fire. Just keep walking with me, quietly powerful, humbly bold, deeply rooted. I'm not finished revealing what your quiet yes has made possible. It wasn't easy. The atmosphere around you was thick with hopelessness. Negativity whispered through conversations. Fear echoed in the silence. You stood in rooms where despair lingered like smoke, where hearts were heavy and minds were weighed down with burdens. And yet, you opened your mouth and chose to speak life. Not because you felt light yourself. Not because everything in your own world was perfect. But because something inside you refused to let darkness have the final word. You chose to declare my truth when it would have been easier to join the silence or mirror the sorrow. That moment was more powerful than you know. I saw you bite your tongue when complaints were the easy route. I saw you gently release words of hope when no one else believed anything good could happen. You weren't pretending. You weren't putting on a mask. You were prophesying from a deeper place, a place that had been refined through fire. The words you spoke came from a well you've been digging in private. That well wasn't shallow optimism. It was deep faith. Faith you cultivated through your own wilderness. Faith you built in nights you cried alone. Faith that didn't need applause to speak truth out loud. And those words you released, they mattered. Even when no one responded the way you hoped. Even when the atmosphere did shift right away. I want you to know they were not wasted. The enemy wanted you to believe your voice was ineffective, that you were talking into a void. But every word rooted in me became a seed. You sowed encouragement in places where people had stopped believing anything would grow. You spoke healing over situations that looked beyond repair. You called peace into places ravaged by conflict. And though some didn't say it, hearts were stirred. Walls were weakened. Hope began to flicker again, all because you didn't stay silent. Speaking life doesn't mean shouting over others. It means releasing what's true, even when it's unpopular. It means offering vision when the fog is thick. You did that. You refused to let your environment shape your speech. You let your spirit shape the environment. You weren't moved by what you saw. You were anchored by what I said. That's the difference. That's why your words carried weight, even if they didn't echo back with affirmation. I heard them. Heaven heard them. And every time you spoke in alignment with me, you were building something invisible but unstoppable. You've become someone I can trust with my voice. You've allowed me to use your mouth not as a weapon of reaction, but as a vessel of redemption. You know when to speak and when to be still. You've learned that the timing of your words matters as much as the truth they carry. That wisdom didn't come quickly, it was formed through surrender, through failing and trying again, through learning what it means to be a voice of life in a culture obsessed with noise. And now, you walk into places not looking for a microphone, but for a moment to release light, a moment to water dry ground with grace. You finally did it. You chose to speak even when your own heart was tired. You gave others what you needed most, and I promise you, I am returning it to you in ways beyond words. You'll begin to see how those conversations, those prayers, those declarations, all of them planted something holy. You may have walked away wondering if you said enough, if it mattered at all. But I was multiplying your words like loaves and fish, feeding spirits that were starving for truth, reviving hearts that were almost gone. And now, because you've spoken life in places others feared to even whisper, I'm going to breathe life into areas of your own soul that you forgot were still waiting for resurrection. You gave out of your need, and now you will receive out of my abundance. Keep speaking. Keep believing. Because when you speak with me, it never returns empty. It changes atmospheres even if no one claps, even if no one nods. I do. And I'm still listening. Your easy ways, quicker routes, paths lined with comfort, compromise, and instant gratification. Opportunities came that would have advanced your position, gained you visibility, or increased your resources, but at a cost to your spirit. And you felt it. Deep inside, even when no one else would have known, you sensed the tension between what was right and what was simply available. And you chose integrity over immediacy. You chose faithfulness over fame. You chose the narrow way, the way fewer walk, the way that often costs more at the start, but yields far more at the finish. I saw the pressure. I saw the moments when taking the long road made you feel left behind. I saw when others, who didn't carry your convictions, seemed to leap forward while you stood still. You questioned it. You wrestled with the silence. You asked me if you were missing your moment by waiting. But your moment wasn't passing you by, it was being preserved. The narrow path doesn't rob you, it refines you. Every step you took with conviction was building spiritual muscle. Every decision you made in secret, refusing to cut corners, was training your soul for endurance and depth. I know how lonely it felt at times. I know how tempting it was to believe the lie that compromise would be harmless. Just once. But you didn't give in. Even when the reward seemed far off, even when your obedience seemed unnoticed, you remained faithful. That faithfulness shaped your character. It made you sturdy in ways the world can't see but heaven never overlooks. And now, because of that choice, you're walking into territory not defined by shortcuts but by stability. What I'm preparing for you isn't shallow success, it's lasting legacy. The narrow path doesn't promise applause. It rarely offers ease. But it does one thing that no shortcut ever will: it leads straight through my heart. It's the path I walked. The path I still walk. And when you chose it, you chose to walk with me, not just for me. That decision opened things in the spirit realm that you have yet to see unfold. It silenced attacks before they reached you. It redirected traps before you stumbled. It positioned you for influence that won't need explanation because your consistency will speak for itself. You learned how to say no, not just to sin, but to anything that tried to steal your alignment with me. You turned down invitations that promised quick outcomes but required your peace in exchange. That's not weakness. That's discernment. That's spiritual maturity. You become someone who doesn't just chase destiny but protects it. And that protection has allowed me to entrust you with more clarity, more direction, more access. Because I know you won't trade truth for convenience. I know you won't abandon the process for a platform. You've proven that your heart is anchored, not just interested. You finally did it. You proved that your yes to me wasn't conditional. It wasn't dependent on how fast things moved or how popular the decision seemed. Your yes stayed firm even when the terrain grew steep. And now, the path you've been walking is about to open into a space of favor and fulfillment you didn't have to manufacture. It's being given, not as a reward you worked for, but as fruit from a tree planted long ago, watered with your obedience, nourished by your surrender. And it will last. It won't collapse when the winds blow. It won't crumble under pressure, because it's rooted in the narrow, hidden, faithful choices that few ever saw, but I saw every one. So walk boldly, knowing that your steps have been carved out by grace. What you refused to rush, I will now accelerate in my timing. What you kept pure, I will now breathe on with power. Because when you chose the narrow way, you chose me fully. And I always honor those who walk the road few are willing to travel. Keep going. There's more ahead than you even hoped for. You didn't ask for recognition. You didn't serve to be applauded. You didn't give to be praised. Still, there were moments when it felt like no one noticed. The hours you poured out, the energy you invested, the comfort you surrendered, it was costly. And yet, you did it quietly, faithfully, without making it about yourself. Others may have assumed your life was smooth, but only I saw what you laid down when no one else was watching. I saw how you gave when you had little. I saw how you stayed when you wanted to walk away. I saw how you withheld what you could have used for yourself so someone else could be lifted. And sacrifice, done without a spotlight, touched heaven. I know how it feels to be unseen in your giving, to wonder if the seeds you're planting are falling into invisible ground. But what you need to know is that I never miss a moment. I count every act of surrender. I bottle every tear you cry in silence when the burden of obedience feels heavier than words can explain. I see when you stay up late to help someone who may never thank you. I see when you choose kindness over revenge, compassion over convenience, and selflessness over selfish gain. These things may not trend, may not be reposted, may not be mentioned in rooms of influence, but they echo loudly in my presence. What's powerful about sacrifice is not the size, it's the heart behind it. You gave not because it was easy, but because it was right. You served not because you had abundance, but because you had love. That love came from me, and you didn't hoard it, you passed it on, freely, quietly, and consistently. And I want you to know, not a single one of those moments was forgotten. The hidden choices you made in secret are the very foundation of the doors I am about to open in public. Because I am a father who sees what is done in the quiet place and rewards in ways that no human hand can match. You didn't give with strings attached. You didn't expect a return. That's why you're the kind of person I can trust with blessing. Because your motivation was never about status, it was about service. Your devotion wasn't dependent on who saw it, it was anchored in who you were. And that identity, child, vessel, servant, is what has drawn my favor to rest upon you. Not momentarily, but permanently. Because your sacrifice didn't come from pride, it came from purity. And what's born from purity doesn't vanish with time, it multiplies in impact. Now, the harvest from those hidden seeds is beginning to sprout. Quietly at first, but soon it will be undeniable. People will look and wonder where the favor came from, not realizing the hours you spent sowing in silence. They won't see the nights you prayed for others before yourself. They won't know the things you walked away from so someone else could have peace. But I know. I always knew. And I've been preparing a return you couldn't have orchestrated on your own. A return not just of resources, but of renewal. Not just of opportunity, but of overflowing joy. You finally did it. You gave me your heart behind the scenes. You didn't need a title to love well. You didn't wait for recognition to serve deeply. And because of that, I'm bringing a reward that can't be stolen or replicated. It's not manufactured, it's miraculous. It's not flashy, it's firm. It won't just bless your life, it will ripple through others in ways you won't always see, but will always matter. So keep walking humbly. Keep giving with open hands. Because I am not just watching, I am rewarding. And what's coming next is shaped by everything you offered when no one else was looking. For so long, you were just trying to make it through. Breathing felt like effort. Smiling took energy you didn't always have. Every day was another climb, another decision to keep going when it would have been easier to collapse. You were thriving, you were surviving. And still, you pressed forward. You didn't have grand visions or perfect plans. You just knew that giving up wasn't an option. I watched every single step. I saw the internal war, the push to keep moving while something inside of you whispered, "It's too much." But you didn't let that voice win. You didn't let despair write your story. You kept walking. And in that faithful movement, a shift began to take place. What started as survival began to transform into something sacred. At first, it was subtle. You began to hear me differently. You started asking deeper questions. You began noticing things you used to overlook, how my presence sat in the silence, how peace didn't come from solutions, but from surrender. The same valleys that once felt like punishment began to feel like invitation. I didn't change your scenery right away, but I changed your spirit. I took your worn-out prayers and turned them into songs of strength. I took your dry ground and began breaking it open for new growth. Slowly, your steps grew steadier, your thoughts clearer, your heart more awake. You were no longer just surviving, you were stepping into something divine. You stopped asking, "When will this end?" and started asking, "What are you doing in this?" That's when your purpose began to rise. Not in flashes of glory, but in the small yeses, the small obediences, the quiet moments where you chose to trust instead of fear, the days you spoke encouragement even when your own soul was weary, the hours you spent helping others heal while you were still waiting for your own breakthrough. Those choices, repeated with love and persistence, became the foundation for the new season you're now entering. This is no longer about holding on by a thread. This is about walking fully in the design I've placed within you. And I want you to hear me clearly. This is just the beginning. You've crossed over from desperation into destiny. The fire that nearly consumed you has now refined you into a vessel that carries healing, wisdom, and clarity. Not because everything is perfect, but because now you know who sustains you. Your foundation isn't built on comfort anymore, it's built on conviction. You're not moved by emotions the way you once were. You're not as easily shaken by delay. That's purpose. That's power. That's what happens when you walk through the furnace and come out not just alive but transformed. You finally did it. You stepped out of the shadows of simply enduring and began to rise into intentionality. What you're carrying now is holy. You're not chasing survival anymore, you're choosing impact. You're asking different questions. You're seeing through different eyes. Your priorities have shifted because your identity is no longer tethered to performance. It's grounded in presence. Mine. Yours. Ours. You're discovering that purpose doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers through simple acts of love and faithfulness. And you're doing it. Day by day. Moment by moment. Purpose isn't ahead of you. It's unfolding within you. And now, I'm aligning your external life to match your internal growth. Doors will open. Connections will form. Resources will flow not because you're striving, but because you're aligned. I've seen the sacrifice. I've watched the transformation. And I will not allow that sacred process to go without reward. What you use to beg me for will now begin to find you. Not as bait for your attention, but as confirmation of your transition. You've moved from just getting through to stepping into all I made you for. And heaven rejoices in that. You've waited so long. Longer than you expected. Longer than others thought reasonable. You've carried my words in your heart like seeds, nurturing them with hope even when it looked like nothing was growing. There were moments you doubted if you heard me right. You questioned if maybe you misunderstood, maybe you imagined it, maybe you believed it too boldly. I saw the battle between faith and frustration. I heard the prayers whispered with trembling hope. God, did you change your mind? Let me answer you clearly, child. No. I didn't forget. I didn't withdraw what I spoke over your life. My promises are not paper, they do not tear under pressure. They are eternal, and they are still in motion. There were seasons where it seemed like everything was moving except what you were believing for. You watched others step into breakthrough while you remained in the in-between. You celebrated them, but deep down, you felt the ache. The delay felt like silence. But my timing is never rooted in forgetfulness. It's anchored in wisdom. I've never been inactive, I've been intentional. While you waited, I was aligning details far beyond your line of sight. I wasn't just preparing what's coming, I was preparing you to hold it. Because the weight of my promises isn't light, and I won't place them in your hands until I know they'll rest securely there. You didn't see what was happening beneath the surface. You saw no movement, but I was working in realms beyond your understanding. Shifting hearts, closing the wrong doors, softening resistance, making sure that when it arrives, it won't collapse under conflict or vanish in transition. What I promise you required divine choreography, not random fulfillment. I never cancel what I've spoken, I cultivate it until the moment is ripe. And beloved, the ground has been breaking. The roots have been taking hold, and now the first signs of fruit are beginning to appear. Don't mistake the quiet for absence. Some of my greatest miracles grow in silence. Some of my strongest words take time to echo through your life. You may not always feel it, but your waiting was never wasted. It has been sacred. I've seen you steward the promise in drought, without evidence, without applause. That matters more than you know. Faith isn't proven in the harvest, it's proven in the desert. And you've proven faithful. You've guarded what I gave you. You've resisted the urge to compromise just to see something move. You've stood firm, even with tired legs and a weary heart. Now, the time is near. The promise is approaching not as a dream, but as reality. Things are beginning to shift in ways that won't require your striving, just your yes. Your obedience has already tilled the soil. What's coming is not a surprise to your spirit, even if it surprises your surroundings. It's familiar because I whispered it long ago. And when it arrives, you won't feel overwhelmed, you'll feel at home. You'll recognize my fingerprints all over it. You'll see how every delay was actually direction. You'll understand why I withheld some things and accelerated others. My plans are not fragile. They are firm. They do not expire. They mature. You finally did it, you held on. And because of that, you will walk into what others gave up on. You will see what others said was impossible. You will reap where others said the field was barren. And when it happens, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that I told you I hadn't forgotten. You'll remember the tears you cried while holding the promise close. And you will know without question it was worth it. Every silent season, every unanswered question, every lowly step of obedience, none of it was in vain. It was all leading you here. So lift your head. You're not just surviving anymore, you're stepping into fulfillment. My words never return void, and the promises over your life, they're alive. They are near, and they are unfolding right now. I saw the moments when you stared at the calendar, at the clock, at the endless list of prayers that felt suspended in the air with no sign of response. Time felt like a burden. The longer you waited, the louder the doubts became. You tried to silence them with reminders of what I've done before, but some days it felt like your faith was walking on crutches, barely holding up the weight of your unanswered questions. You asked me again and again, when? And although I didn't always answer the way you hoped, I was still speaking through the pauses, through the process, through the pace. There were days when the delay felt like denial, but I never withheld out of punishment. I was holding everything in place until the foundation was strong enough to support what I had planned. You saw time as a thief, but I saw it as a teacher. You wanted immediate answers, but I was more concerned with lasting transformation. My timing has never been about speed, it's about sequence. And you learned to trust that, even when everything around you suggested otherwise. What you may not have realized is that your patience was building more than endurance, it was unlocking understanding. With every day you waited without answers, you learned how to rest in my character, not just in my outcomes. You began to understand that delay wasn't me punishing you, it was me preserving you. You no longer looked at the clock with fear, but with peace. That shift didn't happen all at once. It happened in the quiet hours where you chose to stop striving and start trusting. You stopped trying to make things happen and started letting me shape what mattered most, your heart. You learned to wait with expectation, not anxiety. That's a victory I celebrate. You chose to believe that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. You stopped measuring my faithfulness by how fast things changed and started recognizing it in how consistently I stayed with you through every stage of the wait. My child, that kind of trust cannot be taught, it must be walked. And you walk it. Slowly, bravely, humbly. You grew into a new kind of strength, not the kind that rushes ahead, but the kind that walks in sync with grace. And now, because of that trust, you're ready to receive what impatience would have ruined. You no longer need to manipulate circumstances. You no longer fear the passage of time. You've come to realize that what I'm doing in your life is too precious to be rushed. You've surrendered the calendar. You've released the deadlines. And in that surrender, you've stepped into rhythm. Heaven's rhythm. The divine cadence of peace and promise walking hand in hand. You don't need to know every date I hold the schedule. And I'd never miss an appointment. You finally did it. You trusted my timeline over your own. And because you did, you're going to walk into fulfillment without fear. What once made you anxious will now be your testimony. Will speak to others not just about waiting, but about waiting well. You'll become a voice of reassurance to those who are where you once were, restless, tired, uncertain. And you'll be able to say, not as theory but as experience, He's never late. He's always working. That assurance is now part of you. Not something you quote, but something you carry. So rest in it. Let time serve you, not scare you. Every moment I delayed was intentional. Every pause was preparing a deeper reveal. I wasn't making you wait for nothing, I was making you ready for something. And now, the pages are turning. The waiting room is becoming a birthing place. And the things you thought were being withheld are being released, not early, not too late, but precisely when they're meant to. There was a time when every trial triggered confusion. The pain felt personal. The obstacles felt targeted. You couldn't understand why certain burdens landed at your feet, why certain doors stayed closed, or why your heart carried weights you never asked to bear. Why me? Was the cry that echoed through your soul, sometimes loud, sometimes quiet, but always there. It wasn't rebellion. It was real. It was the sound of a weary spirit trying to understand a path that felt harder than expected. And I didn't reject that question. I listened to it. I sat with you in it. I never pushed your pain away. But I also knew there would come a time when your heart would evolve from wondering why to discovering purpose within it. That shift didn't come all at once. It came through tears, through deep breath prayers, through weary moments where you chose to believe I was still working even when you didn't feel it. Slowly, your spirit began to change. You started leaning into me, not to demand explanations, but to receive direction. You stopped fixating on the wound and began focusing on the wisdom I could bring from it. That's when you started asking the better question, not why me, but what now, Lord? And with that one small change in posture, everything began to open. You stepped into partnership with me. You stopped feeling like a victim of your circumstances and began living as a vessel in the midst of them. You no longer waited passively for something to end. You asked how I might use it while it remained. That's the posture of transformation. That's the maturity I've been growing in you all along. You began to see that your journey wasn't about avoidance of pain, it was about discovery of purpose through it. You realized that hardship was not a sign of absence, but an invitation into intimacy. When you asked me what now, you gave me space to speak. You gave me room to move. And I did. Not always in loud ways, but always in life-changing ones. I started opening your eyes to what was possible in places that once felt like prison. I started revealing how the very places you wished to escape were becoming the very places where glory could be born. You didn't escape your situation, you rose in the middle of it. That's what happens when you stop demanding to understand and start choosing to be led. And I want you to know something sacred. When you shifted your question, you also shifted your atmosphere. Heaven began responding differently. Because faith was now leading your responses. Trust was now guiding your steps. I could whisper, and you would hear. I could nod, and you would respond. That's how destiny is shaped, not in ease, but in alignment. And now, your story is no longer just a collection of pain points. It's a testimony of what happens when someone refuses to stay stuck in the why and steps boldly into the what now. You finally did it. You let go of needing all the answers and reached for assignment instead. And because you did, I'm releasing clarity. Not the kind that explains everything at once, but the kind that illuminates your next step. You'll find yourself moving with purpose, not panic. You'll wake up with vision, not dread. Because your heart is no longer chasing resolution, it's anchored in revelation. And that revelation is this: I don't waste anything. Not your pain, not your process, not your questions. I redeem all of it. And now that your hands are open and your ears are listening, I can use you in ways that once required your surrender to be possible. So keep asking me what's next. Not with fear, but with faith. Let that question guide your days, shape your prayers, and lead your decisions. I am not done speaking, and you are not done becoming. The journey is sacred. The shift is real. And because you chose to ask what now, you are walking into what I've been preparing all along. You stood at a crossroads, one no one else could see. Life had offered you plenty of reasons to grow: cold disappointment, betrayal, unanswered prayers, silence that stretched too long. You could have let the weight of it all shape you into someone hard. You could have chosen resentment. You could have let offense define your relationships, let cynicism take root, let anger disguise itself as strength. You could have justified it, too. The world would have nodded in agreement. But something deeper in you chose differently. You didn't want to survive this journey with a guarded heart. You wanted to live through it with a tender one. A decision, quiet and unseen, changed everything. You looked at the pain that could have consumed you, and instead of turning bitter, you allowed me to make it a place of encounter. Instead of building walls, you welcomed me into the wounds. And what could have destroyed your softness began refining your soul. I watched that moment, the moment your spirit whispered, I don't want to be angry. I want to be healed. That whisper, born in the midst of real pain, echoed louder in heaven than any sermon ever could. Bitterness is a prison, and you refused to live in it. You chose freedom, even when it meant walking a slower road. You didn't pretend nothing hurt. You brought the hurt to me. You let me touch the bruised places. You cried, and you stayed. You questioned, but you never quit. And over time, the places that used to sting began to shift. The sharpness softened. The heaviness lifted. And your heart didn't harden, it opened. That's transformation. That's the kind of growth that can't be forced or faked. It's real, and it's holy. Now, you see things differently. You feel with clarity. You speak with compassion. You love with wisdom. Not because life became easier, but because you let grace do its work. You let my spirit enter the story instead of pushing me away in disappointment. You didn't let pain write your identity. You didn't let the past poison your purpose. You surrendered, even when surrender meant letting go of the version of yourself that felt safer behind a guarded heart. And because of that, you've become someone unshakable, not because you're untouched, but because you've been touched by my inner deepest places. You finally did it. You walked through what could have made you bitter and came out better. Your healing isn't shallow, it's rooted. It didn't come through avoidance, it came through honesty. You brought the real you to me, the confused you, the wounded you, the tired you, and I met you with mercy. And that mercy didn't just patch you up, it rebuilt you. You've become someone who carries gentleness with power, depth with joy. You've become someone who sees the pain in others because you've walked through it yourself, and you no longer judge, you reach. That's why I'm expanding your influence now. Not to elevate your name, but to release the healing I've poured into you. Your story carries oil. It will soothe those who are bleeding where you once bled. It will awaken others to the possibility that they, too, can heal. You're not a symbol of perfection, you're a living witness of redemption. And that witness will unlock breakthrough, not just for you, but for those I'm sending your way. Because people don't need poly, they need proof. And you, my beloved, are proof that a surrendered life can bloom after fire. Let me remind you, the softness you've preserved is not weakness, it's authority. In a world that grows harder every day, your heart is a holy resistance. Your peace is a weapon. Your joy is warfare. Your wholeness is revival. You carry something sacred because you chose the narrow way. You let me make you new when bitterness begged for your agreement. And because of that, you're no longer surviving your past, you're rewriting the future. So keep walking with me. Keep choosing mercy over memory, promise over pain, healing over hardness. There's more transformation coming. And each time you choose me over bitterness, heaven moves through you again. You remember the moment well, the one where you thought, I can't go on from here. Not metaphorically, literally. Everything felt too heavy, too dark, too uncertain. The road ahead vanished beneath your feet, and nothing in you felt strong enough to take one more step. You had come to the end of your strength, the edge of your understanding. You felt like you were breaking, shattering under the weight of disappointment, grief, confusion, and fatigue. It didn't feel like transformation then. It felt like loss. It felt like the collapse of everything you were trying to hold together. But what felt like the end to you was actually the beginning to me. I was never afraid of your breaking. I didn't back away. I drew closer. Because when you finally stopped pretending to be okay, when the mask slipped and your hands fell empty to your sides, that's when I could fully step in. I wasn't waiting for your perfection, I was waiting for your surrender. And in that vulnerable place, where your soul was raw and your emotions unraveled, I wasn't disappointed. I was moved. I didn't see weakness. I saw an invitation, an opening, a space where heaven could touch earth in the most personal, intimate way. You see, the world tells you that the breaking point is something to avoid, that it's failure, that it's shame. But in my kingdom, the breaking point is often the sacred intersection where my power meets your humanity. You couldn't hold it all anymore, and you were never meant to. I allowed what you were carrying to become too heavy, not to harm you, but to free you. I let what you thought was secure unravel so that I could rebuild it with something unshakable. I took your breaking and transformed it into a place where miracles could be born. And that's exactly what happened. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not in the way you imagined. But the shift started there when you dropped everything and whispered, "Help me." I heard it. I answered. I didn't just fix what was broken, I began building something new through it. You started to see pieces of yourself that you didn't even know existed. Resilience that rose from the ashes, compassion deepened by suffering, clarity that emerged through surrender. You were not destroyed, you were remade. Now look at yourself. Look at what has come forth from the very place you thought would end you. Peace that doesn't make sense. Strength that doesn't need attention. A faith that doesn't waver with the wind. His breakthrough, not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of victory in the middle of it. I did that in you. Not from afar, but hand in hand with your tears, your honesty, your surrender. You brought me your brokenness, and I brought you something beautiful in return. Purpose, depth, and holy fire that cannot be extinguished. You finally did it. You let the breaking point become a doorway. You didn't run from it. You didn't build walls around it. You walked through it with me. And now, what was once your lowest place is becoming the foundation for your highest calling. That sacred space where you said, "I'm done," is where I began to write a new chapter. A chapter written in your realness, signed with my grace, and sealed with power you didn't know you had. Don't be ashamed of where you broke. Honor it. Because that's where you met me in a way you never had before. That's where healing began to sing its first quiet notes. That's where darkness lost its grip. The enemy wanted that place to define you, but I've used it to refine you. And now, you're stepping forward, not despite your breaking, but because of what I did through it. So walk boldly, not as someone barely recovered, but as someone forever changed. The breakthrough wasn't loud, but it was real. And it began the moment you let go of control and let me carry what you were never meant to hold. Everything shifted. A bib of the blaze of the peace. What once felt familiar became foreign. What used to bring you comfort suddenly became distant. The rhythms you relied on vanished, and the ground beneath your feet trembled in ways that made you question your next step. Life restructured itself without asking your permission. You didn't expect it to unfold the way it did, and for a moment, maybe longer, you felt like you were drowning in transition. What you didn't sink. You didn't let the change swallow you. You turned to me, not with perfect words, but with an open heart. And in doing so, you began to adjust not through human strength, but through divine grace. What the world calls resilience, I call surrender. Because you didn't adapt by force, you adapted by flowing with my spirit. You didn't cling to the past to find your balance. You released what I told you to release, even when it didn't make sense. You held on to peace instead of predictability. And that choice, that sacred decision to let me redefine stability, became the reason you were able to move forward without breaking. You see, true strength isn't found in holding everything together. It's found in letting me hold you together when everything else falls apart. I saw the quiet ways you adjust in. How you changed your prayers, not because your faith weakened, but because your understanding deepened. I watched you shift your posture, not to hide your pain, but to carry it with wisdom. I saw how you let go of your timelines, how you stopped measuring success by what stayed the same and started recognizing growth in how you responded. That, my child, is spiritual maturity. That's what growth looks like, not avoiding disruption, but learning how to walk with me through it. And you didn't just adapt, you transformed. You became more flexible without compromising your core. You became more discerning, able to feel my leading even when the route twisted in unfamiliar ways. You began to see that the stability you craved was never meant to be found in circumstances but in my presence. That revelation unlocked a new kind of peace within you. A peace that doesn't demand answers. A peace that doesn't panic when plans shift. A peace that remains even when the landscape around you looks nothing like what you imagined. You finally did it. You stopped resisting change and started partnering with it through me. And because you did, you didn't lose yourself. You discovered a more complete version of who I made you to be. There are strengths that surfaced in you that would have never come forth without the pressure of change. There's compassion now flowing from places that used to only carry confusion. There's a wisdom in your voice that can only come from walking through seasons where the path was rewritten without warning. And now, I want you to see what I see, a soul that has learned the sacred rhythm of flexibility and faith. A heart that has become unshaken not by staying still, but by staying close to me. You've proven that your foundation isn't circumstance dependent. It's presence built. And because of that, you will not just survive the changes ahead, you will flourish through them. Others will look to you as an example of how to shift without falling apart. Not because you always had clarity, but because you never let go of me. So continue to lean into me when the winds shift. I am your anchor, not your map. I won't always give you the full picture, but I will always provide the next step. And as things continue to evolve around you, know this: nothing changes without my awareness. No movement escapes my notice. I have already gone ahead. I have already prepared the space you are entering. You're not walking into uncertainty, you're walking into new territory with the one who shaped it. Adaptation through me is not compromise, it's obedience. And through that obedience, I'm taking you from reaction to revelation, from instability to insight, from change to calling. Keep walking. What's unfolding now couldn't be birthed through comfort, it required your willingness to evolve. And you, my beloved, have chosen well. You've seen enough to justify shutting down. You've walked through rejection, disappointment, betrayal, and misunderstanding. You've watched people change. You've watched doors close. You've been hurt by those who were supposed to protect, and overlooked by those who should have seen you. The natural response would have been to armor up, to grow distant, cold, calculated, to guard yourself so fiercely that no one could reach the vulnerable places anymore. And yet, you didn't. Even with every reason to withdraw, you chose to stay open. Even when it was risky, you kept loving. Even when it felt dangerous, you let me keep your heart tender. I watched you wrestle with the decision to stay soft. I saw the moments where shutting down seemed like the safer path. I heard the conversations you had with yourself, saying, "I won't let anyone close again," and yet something in you resisted that. It wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. A different kind of strength, a strength the world doesn't celebrate but heaven honors deeply. You learned to let me be your protector so you wouldn't have to become your own prison. That's a rare kind of courage. Because keeping a soft heart doesn't mean being naive. It doesn't mean you ignore what happened or pretended it didn't hurt. No, it means you processed the pain with me instead of becoming it. You gave me access to the wounds instead of covering them with layers of indifference. You sat with me in the grief instead of burying it under bitterness. And slowly, I began to heal those places, not with quick fixes, but with gentle restoration. I preserved the purity of your heart even while life tried to crush it. You finally realized that guarding your heart isn't about building walls, it's about choosing whose hands you place it in. And you placed it in mine. The choice allowed me to do what only I can: keep it alive, responsive, full of my spirit. And now, you walk with compassion that's been tested by fire. You extend grace without needing to be understood. You love without losing yourself. You see people with my eyes, even when they can't yet see themselves. And that's not accidental, that's the fruit of letting me tend to your heart instead of locking it away. This world rewards cynicism. It admires self-protection. But you, my beloved, have chosen something higher. You've chosen to remain available, to let my love flow through you, even when it costs. You've chosen the longer road, the one where love is not just an emotion, but a decision. And that decision has made you dangerous to the enemy. Because he can't do anything with a heart that remains open to me. He can wound, but he can win. He can delay, but he can destroy. Because love is still alive in you, and love, real love, is the most powerful force in the universe. You finally did it. You resisted the pressure to harden. And now, because of that, I am going to entrust you with more influence, more relationships, more opportunities to love the unlovable, to mend what's broken, to speak life where death once lived. You've been trusted with pain, and you didn't waste it. You brought it to me. And now, you'll be trusted with purpose born from that same place. You didn't just survive heartbreak, you grew a garden from it. And the fruit will nourish others. So guard your heart not with walls but with wisdom. Keep it pure. Keep it surrendered. Let me continue to protect the softness within you. Because this world doesn't need more guarded hearts. It needs more hearts like yours, hearts that beat with the rhythm of heaven, hearts that remain open even when it hurts. You are proof that it's possible. You are proof that softness is strength. And I will honor that. I will multiply that. I will use that soft heart to shift hard places. Keep it open. I'm not finished using it. No one saw the quiet wrestle. How you stood in faith for others while you were still asking me to move for you. How you celebrated their wins with a heart still aching for your own. You prayed for their healing while your own wounds were still bleeding. You spoke hope to them while you were hanging on by a thread. You sowed into others' dreams while yours sat on the altar. And though it stretched you and at times felt unfair, you never let the tension turn into resentment. You gave anyway. You loved anyway. You believed anyway. That kind of generosity isn't born from abundance, it's born from obedience. You gave not because you had everything, but because you trusted I was everything. Even when your hands were empty, your heart stayed open. Even when your own prayers seemed unanswered, you carried someone else's burden like it was your own. That's the kind of selfless love that moves heaven. as the kind of sacrificial service that doesn't fade in eternity. I saw each seed you sowed, not just financially, not just through your time, but through your faith. Faith that believed not just for yourself, but for others too. I watched how you resisted the lie that said you had to be whole to help. I watched how you refused to let delay become a reason to disconnect. You didn't need your miracle in hand to speak about my power. You declared who I am even in the silence. And when others came to you in need, you didn't say, "Come back when I'm ready." You said, "Let's seek him together." You took their hand while yours was still reaching. And in that reach you released something sacred: intercession, compassion, grace. That posture matters. You didn't wait for comfort to become a comforter. You didn't wait to be full before you started pouring. And I honored it. I'm still honoring it. Because while you were blessing others, I was building something inside of you, something steady, something pure. You were becoming someone who serves not from circumstance, but from character. Someone whose kindness isn't based on ease but on presence. My presence. You made room for others, even when your own room felt empty. And now, I'm about to fill that space in ways you couldn't have imagined. Because what you gave didn't go unnoticed. I saw the late-night texts, the voice notes of encouragement, the meals you prepared, the offerings you gave. I saw the moments you sowed while silently grieving. I heard the words you spoke while still waiting to hear my answer for yourself. And every one of those moments became a building block in the foundation I've laid beneath your feet. A foundation that is now ready to carry more. Because when you choose to give in the absence of your own abundance, I step in with supernatural supply. You finally did it. You broke the cycle of self-focus. You stopped waiting to be poured into and decided to become a vessel. And vessels that pour, even when cracked, are the ones I trust most. Because they know their strength isn't in their own ability, but in my faithfulness. You were never too empty for me to use. You were just open, and openness is what I bless. The blessing I'm releasing now won't be just for you. It will be through you. You watered others when your own well felt dry. Now, watch me flood your life with living water. The breakthrough you've been waiting for is closer than you think. But more than that, the person you became while you waited, that's the real miracle. You didn't just ask for a move of God. You became part of it. You loved through lack. You helped without hesitation. You served without spotlight. That is kingdom greatness. That is the evidence of a heart formed by heaven. So don't stop blessing. Don't hold back your kindness. What you've sown in faith, I will return in overflow. And when it comes, it will come full, not just to satisfy, but to overflow into others again. Because that's who you are now, a carrier of blessing, even before your own arrived. There were days you felt empty emotionally, spiritually, even physically. You didn't feel strong. You didn't feel wise. You didn't feel ready. But you showed up anyway. You entered conversations with a quiet prayer on your lips, unsure if you had anything meaningful to offer, but willing to give what you had. You walked into rooms with more questions than answers, yet your heart was willing to listen, to care, to give presence even when you couldn't provide solutions. That's what I saw. That's what I honored. You didn't pretend to be more than you were. You didn't mask your need by overcompensating. You simply led with love. Not the loud kind that demands attention, but the steady kind that endures even when it's tired. You were present. You showed compassion when it would have been easier to isolate. You extended patience when irritation could have taken over. You smiled when your heart felt heavy. And those decisions, they weren't small. They were powerful. Because they showed that you had chosen to live from my spirit, not from your circumstances. I know how much effort it took. You could have waited until you felt full, until things were easier, until everything made sense. What you didn't. You gave what you had, even when it didn't feel like enough. And in doing so, you allowed me to multiply it. You brought your 2 loaves and 5 fish not just in your resources, but in your kindness, your energy, your heart. And I turned it into something that reached further than you realized. Your presence, offered humbly, carried my presence into places where people desperately needed light. You didn't see all the fruit, but I did. This world measures value by quantity. I measure it by heart. The love you offered was not based on abundance. It was based on trust. Trust that I could do more with your little than others could do with much. Trust that the offering of yourself, authentic, unguarded, vulnerable, was more precious than anything polished or rehearsed. And that kind of offering carries weight in heaven. It shifts atmospheres. It heals wounds. It speaks louder than grand gestures ever could. You finally did it. You showed up when you felt unseen. You gave when you felt forgotten. You loved when you felt empty. And now, because of that, I am releasing fresh strength into your life. Not because you earned it, but because you made space for it. You chose love over self-preservation. You poured out even when your cup didn't feel full. And now, I am filling you again, not just for restoration, but for release. What I pour into you next will not only refill what was poured out, it will overflow. Because you've proven that I can trust you to carry my heart. You are the kind of person who can walk into a broken space and bring peace. Not because you have all the answers, but because you carry my nature. Your presence, shaped by love and refined by humility, is a healing agent. People feel safe around you, not because you fix their problems, but because you don't need to. You simply stay. You simply love. And that love makes room for me to do what only I can. So don't underestimate your presence. Don't belittle what you bring. When you walk in with love, you walk in with power. And every time you choose to show up when it would be easier to withdraw, heaven moves. Every act of love, no matter how small, builds something eternal. You gave from your lack. I'm now releasing abundance. You love it from your weakness. I'm now infusing strength. You didn't let the absence of resources keep you from responding to need. And because of that, I'm opening doors you never asked for because you were too busy serving to chase after favor. But favor is chasing you now, not to reward your effort, but to partner with your heart. Keep loving. Keep showing up. I'm not done multiplying what you carry. There were voices, some loud, some subtle, that tried to steer you away from where I had placed you. They've questioned your choices, your pace, your convictions. They offered easier alternatives, louder platforms, and quicker results. Their intentions may not have been cruel, but their influence brought confusion. You felt the pressure to explain yourself, to defend your obedience, to adjust your direction so that it made more sense to others. But deep within you, my voice was steady, gentle but sure. You didn't need to defend what I designed. You only needed to keep walking. And that's exactly what you did. You stayed on the path I carved for you, even when it looked different, even when it cost you opportunities, even when it made you feel alone. While others changed lanes to match the crowd, you kept following me through the quiet, through the detours, through the valleys. I saw your loyalty. I saw your restraint when you could have responded with frustration. I saw your humility when you were misunderstood. You didn't allow confusion to derail your conviction. You chose me over popular opinion. You chose my whisper over the noise of approval. That matters more than you know. Because the road I gave you wasn't random, it was tailor-made. It wasn't designed for speed. It was built for depth. I never called you to replicate what others are doing. I called you to reflect me, even when the reflection looks unfamiliar to the world around you. You didn't need validation from those who couldn't see what I revealed to you. You only needed clarity from me, and you trusted it, even when it meant walking alone. That kind of faithfulness doesn't just preserve calling, it strengthens it. You learned to stop asking, "Do they understand me?" and started asking, "Am I still following you?" That shift was everything. It moved you from insecurity to purpose. It freed you from needing everyone's agreement before taking your next step. And because of that, you've become someone who doesn't just follow direction, you carry discernment. You're not swayed by trends. You're not moved by external measurement. You move when I say move. You stay when I say stay. That posture has built a root system in you that no storm can shake. You finally did it. You walked in obedience without needing applause. You stayed in alignment without demanding explanation. And now, I'm releasing confirmation. Not from those who questioned you, but from me. I'm going to begin showing you why I led you the way I did. You'll begin to see connections forming that only make sense because of the path you chose to stay on. You'll start seeing fruit where others only saw silence. You'll begin to realize that the waiting, the wondering, the warfare, it all had purpose. You didn't miss out. You were being positioned. While others sprinted ahead, I was strengthening your stride. While others chased visibility, I was shaping your vision. And now, that vision is sharp. Your steps are steady. Your resolve is anchored. You've proven that you're not just interested in calling, you're committed to carrying it with integrity. That's why I can trust you with more. Not because you performed, but because you persevered. Let me remind you of this. Faithfulness will always take you farther than popularity ever could. The places I'm sending you now won't require performance, they'll require presence. And you carry that presence. You walk with a stillness that was formed in secret. A courage that wasn't born in crowds but in communion. A wisdom that didn't come from books but from broken places where you met me deeply. That's what sets you apart, not because you're better, but because you're willing. So keep walking your path, even when others don't understand it. It's not theirs to understand. It's yours to walk, and mine to guide. You're not behind. You're not off course. You are exactly where I want you, following me when it's quiet, trusting me when it's questioned, and staying the course when it's tempting to veer off. And for that, I am proud of you. I never asked you to carry it all. I never expected you to be unshakable in your own strength. But I saw how hard you tried. I watched you attempt to hold everything together for the sake of those around you, for the sake of progress, for the sake of survival. You thought being strong meant being silent, being composed, being in control. But inside, you were exhausted, quietly overwhelmed, pressured to appear steady, even while your soul cried out for rest. And yet, through all of that pressure, you never let go of me. You didn't need to be the strongest in the room. You just needed to remain open to my presence. And you did. Even when your hands trembled, you lifted them. Even when your voice cracked, you whispered my name. That wasn't weakness, it was the truest form of strength. Because strength in my kingdom isn't about pushing through alone. It's about yielding again and again to the one who never runs out of strength. You came to me not when you were at your best, but when you were at your limit. And I didn't turn you away. I met you there. Every time you surrendered, something holy happened. You gave me your pride, and I clothed you in humility. You offered me your confusion, and I gave you clarity and pieces. You laid down your fear, and I filled you with courage that didn't make sense to anyone else. Surrender became your sanctuary. It wasn't dramatic, it was daily. Choosing again and again to say, I can't do this alone. And in those quiet declarations, your faith deepened. Not because everything changed on the outside, but because your trust grew stronger inside. You stopped measuring your growth by how much you could endure. You started recognizing that my grace doesn't flow through clenched fists, it flows through open hands. And in those moments where you let go of expectations, of timelines, of the need to have it all figured out, I stepped in. You gave me room to move. And move I did. Sometimes subtly, sometimes suddenly, but always in response to surrender. You finally did it. You released the illusion that you had to be enough on your own. You stopped fighting battles with your own strength and started inviting me to fight for you. That's when the shift occurred. You weren't just surviving, you were being sustained. You were no longer fueled by pressure, you were carried by peace. You didn't need to know every next step, you just needed to know I was guiding your feet. And because of that surrender, I'm elevating you. Not the kind of elevation the world chases, not fame or fortune or approval, What spiritual elevation, clarity, wisdom, discernment, peace in places where anxiety used to live, confidence that doesn't shout but rests. You're being lifted in unseen ways. Your spirit is lighter. Your mind is clearer. Your steps are guided. You become someone who leads from love, not from striving. Someone who carries calm even when the world feels chaotic. Now, others will come to you not because you always look strong, but because you've become a safe place. Your surrender has birthed authority. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that shifts rooms just by being present. Because your presence is filled with mine. And that happened because you chose not to prove your strength, but to lean into mine. So don't feel pressure to return to self-reliance. Keep letting me be your source. Keep handing me the pieces. Keep walking in the quiet assurance that I am enough in every place you feel lacking. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are beautifully dependent on me, and that's the safest, most powerful place to be. There was no map in your hands. No clear road signs. No voice booming from the sky giving you exact instructions. Just a nudge. A quiet conviction. A sense deep in your spirit that I was asking you to move forward, deeper, closer. You hesitated, not because you didn't love me, but because you didn't want to misstep. You didn't want to choose wrong. But even in that hesitation, your heart was asking the right question. Lord, where are you in this? That posture, that humble hunger for my direction was where your journey truly began. You didn't need to see the whole picture. You just needed enough light for the next step. And that's what I gave you. Not always the full vision, but just enough to invite trust. You wanted certainty. I gave you closeness. You asked for details. I offered presence. Because what you were building wasn't just a plan, it was intimacy. You didn't realize it then, but those unsure steps you took were some of your most powerful. You weren't walking in confidence of what was ahead, you were walking in confidence of who was beside you. That is the kind of faith that pleases me most. Each time you said yes without full understanding, you grew stronger in ways the world couldn't measure. While others chased certainty, you cultivated trust. While many waited for clarity, you moved when I said, come. You let go of the need to control, and you grabbed hold of my hand. That one choice over and over again wrote your future. Because your life is no longer governed by external stability. It's ruled by internal alignment. Your compass is not culture, it's communion. I saw the days when you questioned yourself. When you looked around and wondered if you were behind. When you compared your pace to others who seemed to move faster, achieve more, gain visibility. I saw you wrestle with the temptation to abandon the slow path for something shinier. But you stayed. You trusted. And now, your steps are no longer shaky, they are sure. Not because you know exactly where the road leads, but because you know the one who designed it. You finally did it, you chose obedience over certainty. And that choice opened doors you didn't even know existed. It aligned your life with my rhythm. And now, because you've learned to move with me in mystery, I can take you places where sight alone could never sustain you. You've been trained by trust. You've been shaped by surrender. You've grown familiar with my voice in the fog, not just on the mountaintop. That's the kind of follower I can lead into new territory. I'm not just leading you for your sake, I'm preparing you to lead others. Not with formulas, but with faith. You'll guide not by giving answers, but by pointing to me. You'll walk beside those who feel lost and help them discover that clarity isn't the first step, trust is. And they'll believe you not because of your eloquence, but because your life is living proof. Proof that it's possible to walk with confidence even when nothing is guaranteed. Proof that faith isn't reckless, it's rooted. The path ahead still won't always be clear. There will still be days when you feel unsure, when you wonder if you're ready, when you wish I'd give you more details. But now you know. I am always enough. I won't let your foot slip. I won't let your purpose be missed. As long as you continue to move with me, I will continue to make a way. And when the path feels narrow, remember your steps are never wasted when I am the one guiding them. So keep walking. Keep choosing me. Don't wait for every answer to start again. The same voice that called you into this journey will carry you through it. You don't need to have it all figured out, you just need to stay willing. Willing to trust. Willing to go slow. Willing to believe that I know what I'm doing with your life. And I do. More than you know. Perfection was always around you, expectations from people, the silent pressure to get it all right, the fear of failing in front of those who only notice when you fall. There was a time when you believed that doing things flawlessly was the only way to be accepted, the only way to feel safe. You carried that pressure for too long, wearing a smile when your soul was aching, trying to meet standards I never set for you. The world taught you that your worth was tied to performance. But I've been teaching you something better. Your value isn't in perfection, it's in proximity to me. And you've learned it. Slowly, painfully at times, but deeply. You began to unlearn the belief that mistakes disqualify you. You started to see that striving only steals your peace. Instead of hiding your flaws, you began bringing them to me. You stopped waiting to feel ready enough and started choosing real connection. That's when the shift happened. You stopped performing and started dwelling. You discovered that what I longed for wasn't a polished version of you, it was the honest, unfiltered you. The one who comes with tears, questions, weakness, and wonder. The one who doesn't have all the answers but keeps seeking me anyway. I didn't call you to be perfect. I called you to be present. And now, your life is beginning to reflect that. You wake up not to oppress me, but to walk with me. You serve not to earn favor, but because you're living from it. You pray not to sound holy, but because your heart longs for me. You finally understand that I'm not waiting for you to reach some imagined level of spiritual performance. I'm walking with you through every stage, every slip, every step. You finally did it. You laid down the need to prove yourself. And in doing so, you made space for peace. That peace has become your anchor. It doesn't demand perfection. It grows through presence. Because where I am, there is freedom. And you've stepped into that freedom. You don't define success the way you used to. It's no longer about being seen or being flawless. It's about staying close to me, even when it's messy. And that closeness is transforming everything. You stopped condemning yourself for being human. You stopped punishing yourself for days when your faith feels thin. You stopped hiding the parts of you that are still healing. And because of that, you become more whole. Not perfect, but whole. Your heart is softer. Your voice is steadier. Your presence brings calm. Not because you're without blemish, but because my presence is resting on you, and that changes atmospheres. Others see it too. They may not know how to describe it, but they feel safe around you. Not judged. Not measured. Just seen. Just loved. Because that's what happens when someone stops striving and starts surrendering. You carry grace, not pressure. You offer space, not scrutiny. You know what it's like to be held together by mercy, and you extend that mercy effortlessly. And now, I'm going to use you in new ways, not because you're perfect, but because you're available. I'm going to place you in spaces that don't need a performer, they need a carrier of peace. I'm going to open doors that don't require perfection, they require presence. And you, my beloved, have chosen well. You've chosen the better thing. You've chosen to sit at my feet rather than chase approval. And from this place of intimacy, I will do more through you than striving ever could. So stay with me. Not because you've reached a goal, but because this is your home. This is where your soul breathes freely. This is where fruit grows without force. You don't need to earn my love, it's already yours. And you don't need to fear failure, it doesn't frighten me. I'm not forming you into a flawless image. I'm shaping you into someone who looks like me, full of truth, full of grace, full of love. And that's more than enough. There were seasons when everything in you wanted to escape. The pressure was intense. The waiting stretched longer than you ever thought it would. The soil felt dry. The scenery didn't change. You wondered if staying was foolish. You wrestled with the silent temptation to walk away, not because you didn't love me, but because you were tired. You felt buried, hidden beneath circumstances that seemed stagnant. You questioned if anything was really happening underground. And still you remained. That decision, though it looked simple to others, was one of the most courageous choices you've ever made. Because remaining requires faith. It requires trust that something is growing even when you can't see it. It requires commitment when everything in the natural suggests motion would be more productive. But I wasn't asking you to bloom on command, I was asking you to take root. And roots, my child, are always formed in silence. Every day you chose to stay where I placed you, even when it felt uncomfortable, you were strengthening your foundation. You did always feel fruitful, but you were becoming unshakable. While others rushed to the next opportunity, you let me develop depth. You traded temporary relief for eternal preparation. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. I saw the moments you cried in hidden places, asking me if I had forgotten you. I saw you look at your life and wonder if anything you were doing really mattered. But what you didn't see was how deeply your roots were spreading, how your spirit was being fortified to hold more than you ever imagined. I wasn't ignoring you. I was enlarging you. Because the fruit I have planned for you couldn't grow without that kind of root system. You finally did it. You broke the cycle of quitting too soon. You didn't uproot when things got hard. You didn't let discomfort convince you to chase distractions. You stayed present in the slow work I was doing. And now, because you stayed, the ground beneath you is no longer fragile, it's firm. And everything I build on your life from this moment forward will be supported by what you developed during that season of stillness. Your staying power speaks loudly in the spirit realm. It announces to heaven and hell that you are no longer led by impulse, you are anchored in identity. You are no longer looking for escape, you are looking for encounter. And that encounter has changed you. You're no longer easily swayed. You're no longer chasing quick results. You've learned to love the process, even when it stretches you. You've learned to trust my timing, even when it doesn't align with yours. The beauty of your rootedness is that it now allows others to find rest in your shade. Your life is becoming a refuge, not because everything looks perfect, but because your presence carries peace. That peace wasn't built in a day. It was built in the staying, in the showing up, and the choosing again and again to remain grounded in me, no matter what the storm looked like above the surface. Now, I'm preparing to accelerate things, but not in a rushed way, in a ripened way. The roots are ready, so the growth can come. Not only will you bear fruit, but your life will nourish others. You'll speak with authority, not just because of what you know, but because of what you've endured. You'll stand firm while others scatter, and you'll bring stability into unstable environments, because you have become stable through me. So don't regret the seasons that seem slow. Don't look back on the days of small beginnings as wasted. They were holy. They were necessary. They were forming you into someone who can hold what I'm about to release. Staying when it was easier to flee became the foundation of your next season. And now, because you stayed, I will cause you to flourish. You're no longer trying to find your place. You've grown into it. There was a time when your happiness hinged on results, answered prayers, open doors, visible progress. You looked for joy in milestones and moments, hoping each one would finally bring the deep satisfaction you were craving. You measured days by what got done and dreams by how fast they were unfolding. And when things stalled or shifted, your joy would falter. You didn't mean to tie your heart so tightly to outcomes, it's how the world taught you to live. But I was inviting you to something deeper. I wasn't just offering you answers. I was offering you myself. And somewhere along the way, you accepted that invitation. Slowly, gently, quietly. You started to realize that my presence wasn't just a means to an end, it was the gift itself. You began looking for me, not just for what I could do, but for who I am. You started to breathe differently, to think differently. You stopped waiting for everything to change and started changing how you saw everything. That shift wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. but it was holy. You began to smile before the blessing arrived. You found peace even in the pauses. You stopped rushing through life and started walking with me in the ordinary. That's where real joy lives, not in the peak moments, but in the process. You discovered me in the quiet routines, in the in-between spaces, in the places where most people stop looking. And because of that, your joy became untouchable. It stopped depending on circumstances. It started flowing from communion. You finally did it. You stopped chasing the feeling and started building the foundation. You let me become the source instead of the supplement. Now, your joy doesn't fluctuate with your bank account or relationships or plans. It flows even on difficult days. It stands tall even when things don't make sense. Because it's rooted in something eternal. Our connection. I know you still have desires. I know there are things you're waiting on, believing for, praying over. But they don't own you anymore. You're not living in a state of constant anticipation. You're living in sacred awareness. You've realized that joy isn't just the celebration of what's to come, it's the recognition of who's walking beside you now. That revelation has shifted the entire atmosphere of your heart. Others will see it. They'll feel it. Not because you always look happy, but because you carry something stable, something deep, something that doesn't break under pressure. They'll ask how you remain calm, how you keep going, how you find light in dark places. And you'll know it's not about pretending things are perfect. It's about knowing you're not alone, that I'm with you in every moment. And that's more than enough. I delight in your joy, not because it's loud, but because it's pure. You no longer need a pause to feel alive. You no longer need signs to believe I'm working. You found joy in my nearness, and that joy has become your strength. It's not seasonal. It's not situational. It's supernatural. And it's going to sustain you through what's next. To live in it. Stay in it. Let that joy lead your steps, color your words, soften your thoughts. You're not chasing the next big thing, you're experiencing the eternal thing. And that is what makes you unshakable. Because joy, when it's born from me, can never be taken. It may quiet in sorrow, but it always returns with even greater depth. You've discovered that now, and I will continue to deepen it within you. I'm proud of you not because you checked every box, but because you found beauty in what others called boring. You let me become your reason before your prayers became reality. And that makes you ready for anything. Because when joy becomes your default posture, nothing the enemy does can displace you. You walk in overflow now. And where you go, my joy goes with you, inviting others to come closer and taste it for themselves. There were days when everything pulled at you. People needing your attention. Responsibilities weighing heavy. Distractions creeping in from every direction, some loud, some subtle. Your time felt thin. Your energy stretched. Your soul weary. The demands around you rarely paused, and rest felt like a luxury you couldn't afford. And yet, in the middle of that pressure, you did something most overlook. You made space for me. Not because it was convenient, but because you craved me more than ease. You didn't wait for the schedule to clear. You didn't wait for the perfect moment. You chose me in the chaos. You whispered prayers while multitasking. You turned your attention toward me when you could have numbed yourself with noise. You leaned into my presence in the small slivers of silence. And that choice, those quiet decisions to welcome me in when everything else was shouting, became holy ground. You didn't need a retreat to find me. You simply needed willingness. And I met you right there. You did have hours to give, but you gave your heart. You didn't bring elaborate rituals, you brought your real self. And I honored it. Every time you carved out a moment, no matter how short, to listen, to worship, to be still, heaven leaned in. I wasn't measuring the minutes. I was listening to the sincerity. And your love was unmistakable. You didn't just make me part of your life, you invited me into all of it. That kind of devotion is rare in a distracted world. Most are too busy for stillness, too driven to pause, too consumed by progress to sit in presence. But you've chosen the better portion. You've learned that making space for me doesn't slow you down, it strengthens your steps. It centers your heart. It clarifies your mind. It breathes life back into your soul. You've discovered the secret of sustainability, intimacy over activity, and that revelation has changed everything. You finally did it. You stopped squeezing me in and started building life around me. And because of that, I'm doing something sacred in your midst. The more you prioritize my presence, the more peace you'll carry into every space. The more you turn your eyes to me, the more vision you'll receive. You'll find that what used to feel heavy now feels held, not because the circumstances changed, but because the weight isn't yours to carry alone anymore. This is the rhythm of abiding, not frantic, but full, not rushed, but rich. You've learned to bring me into your pace, not just your prayer time. To talk to me in the car, in the kitchen, in the interruptions. I'm not looking for performance, I'm longing for connection. And you've responded beautifully. You stopped compartmentalizing your spiritual life from the rest of your day. And because of that, your entire life is being transformed. And now I'm expanding your awareness. You'll start to recognize my voice more easily, even in the middle of noise. You'll feel nudges during your meetings, your errands, your quiet chores. You'll become more attuned to divine appointments, more sensitive to what I'm doing around you. Because my presence is not just for quiet rooms, it's for everywhere you go. And you've made room in your heart, not just in your schedule. So keep choosing me in the crowded spaces. Keep inviting me into the mundane. Keep carving out moments to breathe, to listen, to rest with me. The fruit will follow. The clarity will increase. The favor will rise. Not because you chased after it, but because you sat with the one who brings it. And from that place, everything flows, not in striving, but in stillness. You didn't need perfect conditioned. You just needed a willing heart. And that's what I found in you. And now that you've made room, I will fill it with more than you imagine, not with noise, but with nourishment. Not with pressure, but with power. Because I dwell not in crowded calendars, but in open hearts. And yours, my beloved, is wide open. There was a time when shame tried to silence your approach, when guilt whispered that you had to get it all together before coming close to me. You looked at your flaws, your inconsistencies, your unspoken struggles, and wondered if they disqualified you from my nearness. There were moments when your heart longed to draw close, but your mind hesitated, replaying past failures, reminding you of everything you weren't. And yet you came. Not perfectly, not with every question answered, but with sincerity, with a heart that dared to believe I wanted you even in your weakness. You stepped past the fear that said you had to be polished. You silenced the lie that said you had to earn my embrace. And you approached me not pretending, not performing, just present. A decision didn't come from confidence in yourself. It came from trust in my character. You chose to believe that my arms were open, even when everything inside you said you weren't enough. And my child, that kind of trust moves heaven. I was never looking for someone flawless. I was looking for someone real. And you came to me as you were wounded, unsure, sincere. That is worship. That is what I receive. You didn't let the mess disqualify you. You let it lead you into grace. You weren't driven by pride. You were drawn by love. And love is always stronger than shame. Love rewrote the narrative that said you had to fix yourself before coming to me. Instead, you let me do the fixing. And because of that, your heart has begun to heal. You finally did it. You stopped trying to clean yourself up to earn my gaze. You looked at me from the middle of your chaos and believed I would meet you there. And I did. Not with judgment, but with joy. Not with anger, but with affection. I never recoiled from your wounds, I reached for them. I never turned from your tears, I caught everyone. I never waited for perfection to pursue you, I came running the moment you turned your heart toward me. Now, the way you see me has changed. And the way you see yourself is changing, too. You're learning to stand in my presence without hiding. You're learning to speak without editing your soul. You're learning that intimacy isn't built on performance, it's built on honesty. You've discovered that I'm not afraid of your questions. I'm not offended by your emotions. I'm not distant in your discouragement. I'm near. Always near. And you've begun to live from that awareness. Others may still be trying to earn what I've already given freely. But you stepped into rest. You're no longer striving for a seat at my table. You're sitting there. You're no longer hoping to be welcomed. You've realized you were wanted all along. That shift, though internal, has created a transformation that radiates through your life. You love more freely. You forgive more easily. You walk more lightly. Because the pressure to prove yourself has finally lifted. And now, because you've come as you are, I'm building you into who you're becoming. Not from a place of condemnation, but from compassion. I'm growing you gently. I'm shaping you with care. You don't have to force the change, it's happening naturally in my presence. You'll look back months from now and see just how much healing has occurred simply because you kept coming close. Not perfect. Just present. To keep coming. And the hard days are the good ones. When you feel strong and when you feel spent. You don't need to impress me, you just need to be with me. My love isn't reserved for your best version. It's poured out over you now, just as you are. And as long as you keep bringing me your heart, I will keep filling it with more of mine. You came when you didn't feel worthy. And now, you walk in the freedom of knowing you always were. There was a moment when you realized that healing wasn't going to be instant. You prayed for relief, hoped for sun and breakthrough, longed for the pain to be gone overnight. But when it didn't happen the way you imagined, you had a choice to walk away in frustration or to walk with me in faith. You chose me. Not because it was easy. Not because the pain disappeared. But because something inside you trusted that I could make something beautiful out of even this slow, unseen process. You stopped measuring progress by how quickly the tears stopped or how often the ache returned. Instead, you began to recognize healing in the small shifts, the softer thoughts, the deeper breaths, the moments of laughter that surprised you. You stopped demanding that your heart be whole overnight and started believing that wholeness could be cultivated moment by moment. I saw it. Every time you chose to let me into another layer, every time you dared to sit in silence with your wounds rather than numbing them, every time you laid down your timeline and whispered, "Have your way," I was there. Healing, in my hands, is never rushed. It's sacred. It's careful. It's tailored to your heart. I never asked you to skip steps. I never pushed you past your breaking point. I walked with you at your pace, letting grace lead. And when you couldn't take another step, I carried you not out of pity, but because that's what love does. I wasn't in a hurry to fix you. I was invested in fully restoring you. And because you didn't run, because you stayed with me through the discomfort, I've been able to rebuild you from the inside out. You finally did it. You stopped trying to escape the process. You embraced it. You leaned into the pain instead of pushing it away. You opened old doors, not to relive the past, but to let light in. And now, you are healing in ways no one else can measure but me. You've grown quieter in your spirit, gentler with your own heart. The shame has started to lift. The fear has begun to loosen its grip. The lies that used to sound like your own voice are being replaced by truth, my truth whispered in the stillness of our time together. And you've noticed it. You carry peace now, not always loud, but steady. You don't panic in the same places you used to. You don't run from the same memories that once chased you. It's not that you've forgotten the pain, it's that it no longer defines you. That's what healing really is. It's not erasing the story. It's reclaiming it with me at the center. And that's what you've done. You've invited me to rewrite what once felt too broken to ever hold beauty again. Others may not understand why you move slower now, why you pause before speaking, why you guard your peace. But you know. You've been through a refining, a real one, and it's made you not harder, but holier. You're no longer reactive, you're reflective. You've developed wisdom born in silence, compassion birthed from deep waters, and that depth is becoming a gift to others. Because healed people bring healing. And you, my beloved, are becoming a well that others will draw from, not because you're perfect, but because you are whole in ways that matter most. So take heart. The healing is not over, it's unfolding. It's not behind you, it's happening even now, in layers. And I am with you in each one. You never walked this alone. You never healed in isolation. My hand was always on your heart, gently mending what the world didn't see. And what's being formed through this healing journey will last. It will outlive the pain. It will speak louder than the wounds. Because it's not just about you getting through, it's about you being transformed. Keep letting me in. Keep walking with me. The path may still be quiet, but the work is loud in heaven. You are becoming whole. And that, my child, is a miracle unfolding in real time. There was a time when unanswered questions kept you up at night. You wrestled with the need to understand every detail, to know why things happened, how they would unfold, and when breakthrough would arrive. You searched for patterns, signs, confirmations, anything to give your mind peace. You believed that clarity would give you confidence, that certainty would silence fear. But even as you gathered information, your soul remained restless. Because knowledge alone cannot quiet the heart. Only trust can do that. And then came the shift. It wasn't loud. It wasn't instant. But something inside of you began to surrender the demand for explanations. You stopped chasing reasons and started chasing me. You realized I wasn't inviting you into understanding, I was inviting you into intimacy. You no longer needed to figure it all out. You just needed to walk with the one who already had it figured out from the beginning. You didn't become indifferent. You became dependent. You still asked questions, but not with desperation. Now, you ask with openness, with a willingness to be led even if the full picture isn't revealed. That's a sign of spiritual maturity, not that the questions go away, but that they no longer control your peace. You stopped building your stability on answers and started anchoring your heart in my voice. I've watched how you've grown more comfortable in the unknown. You used to flinch when things felt uncertain. And now you breathe deeper, wait longer, listen more. A kind of peace doesn't come from understanding a plan. It comes from knowing the planner. And you've come to know me not just as Savior, but as shepherd, gentle, attentive, trustworthy. You've learned that my silence isn't absence. It's invitation. It's space for trust to grow roots. You finally did it. You let go of needing to know everything, and you started resting in being known by me. That's where real security is found. Not in getting answers, but in being held through the unknown. And because of that surrender, your inner world has changed. You don't panic like you used to. You don't obsess over timelines. You're no longer trapped in cycles of anxiety. You found stillness that doesn't depend on circumstances, but flows from your connection to me. Now, instead of fearing the unknown, you've learned to explore it with me. You've discovered that mystery isn't meant to scare you, it's meant to draw you deeper. Not everything I do will make sense right away. Some things are hidden not to frustrate you, but to protect you. Some revelations are reserved for the right time, not withheld out of cruelty, but preserved in love. And now, you trust that. You no longer rush me. You wait with expectation, not demand. That's the kind of faith that I treasure. Others may still try to explain everything, to define every detail. But you've learned that wonder is a gift. You've learned that not knowing doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're being led. And now, others are drawn to your calm. They notice your peace. They see that you carry answers without having to explain everything. Because you've become a living example of what it means to rest in divine wisdom. I'm proud of how you've embraced this journey. I know it wasn't easy to release control. I know how tightly you held on to your questions, hoping they would somehow anchor you. But when you placed them at my feet, when you allowed me to carry what your mind couldn't solve, you entered into something eternal. You step out of the storm of needing to know and into the safety of being known. So keep trusting me with the details. I see what you can. I'm working in ways beyond your understanding. And one day, the very things that confuse you will become the markers of my faithfulness. You'll look back and see how every unknown was an opportunity for greater trust. And that trust will become the foundation for the next season I lead you into. You don't need to have all the answers. You have me, and that is more than enough. Amen.